when the going got tough, you caved.
Netanyahu said his message was being broadcast on loudspeakers into Gaza.
Lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages. All of them. The whole 48. Free the hostages now.
He held up a map of the region titled The Curse. Former FBI Director James Comey and President Trump traded barbs on social media after the Justice Department indicted Comey on charges of obstruction and making a false statement when he denied leaking information to the press during Senate testimony 5 years ago. CBS News Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan.
Comey says he has faith in the justice system in terms of how this would play out. In other words, an indictment is not a conviction, and he seems to be very confident that that won't happen.
In his Instagram post, Comey said, "Bring on the trial." On Truth Social, President Trump called Comey a bad cop. Defense Secretary Hegseth summoned hundreds of generals and admirals from around the world to a meeting in Virginia next week. The Pentagon hasn't said why. Correspondent Charlie Daggett.
A lot of questions here as to why Secretary is meeting them in person rather than on like a secure video conferences in the past. Aside from security considerations of having all that brass in one place at one time, it's going to cost a lot of money to fly them in from all over the world.
Meteorologist Craig Allen is keeping tabs on a hurricane that formed this morning in the Caribbean.
Humberto should stay away from land areas even into the weekend, and as the track continues to bend a little bit more to the north and then eventually to the northeast, staying in between the United States and Bermuda.
Number of babies born with syphilis is still rising. CBS's Michael George.
New CDC data shows cases of the sexually transmitted infection, which can be passed from mothers to babies, are up nearly 700% since 2015. The data also shows other sexually transmitted infections are declining in the U.S., with experts crediting greater awareness and prevention tools.
Syphilis in newborns has been linked to lifelong issues like hearing loss. The Dow is up 358. This is CBS News.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell, and I'm doing a live stream on Rumble, YouTube, simulcasting on X Spaces, and also broadcasting on the two different versions on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, under Broadcast Live. So thank you for joining. If you have a question, just type it in the text or ask for the mic on X Spaces. You can follow me on X or GETTR. You can subscribe to all my channels. Please do. I have 4 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please subscribe to all the channels. All the links are in the description of this video and all my videos. If you like the work that I do, everything I do is for free. I put thousands of videos out there for free for individuals to understand the news in my perspective. If you'd like to help to support, please share the links. Ask your social media to follow me. Make sure you subscribe to all the channels and help through donations. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee on my website on the homepage at the very bottom. You can be a paid member to my Patreon channel and or be a paid member to my Substack. I have a new Substack link, so please click that link and subscribe. That helps to support the free content that I provide everybody. If you pay attention to what I have to say, you'll learn about what's going on in scientific endeavors, what's going on in the market, my perspective on international policy, and how it's forming potentially World War III, and how to improve your health and wellness. So thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. If you follow the protocol, you will slow down the aging process improve your immune system, and be prepared for the fall and winter. It is going to be problematic in the United States, especially, so be prepared. If you've been listening to me regularly, you'll know exactly what to do. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in lavender, in peppermint, very high quality soaps. You can also get them in charcoal tea tree and in lemongrass. Get a few bars for your household, very high quality, way better than Procter & Gamble. Plus, you're helping support your health and supporting the channel. It's a win-win situation. Thank you for joining. Make sure you use discount 5 so you can save some money. Use all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift, and that free gift you're going to need for the fall and winter season. All right, with that said, let's go back to Bloomberg.
By IBKR, financial advisors switch to interactive brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest. Learn more at ibkr.com/RIA. Like I say, today it's all about inflation and inflation expectations. The major stock averages are higher. S&P 500 up 25 points. The Dow up 67 points. And right now the NASDAQ 119 points higher.
All right,
let's get right to the.
Let's talk about the market a little bit. So the S&P 500 is trading at 6,625. There's a resistance level at 6,700. Job data that came out this week, it seems more positive than negative, and therefore there's questions about how many rate cuts would take place this year and the beginning of next year by the Federal Reserve. So there's going to be resistance level at 6,700. Also, inflation is a little bit sticky, so that's also problematic for cutting rates by the Federal Reserve. So there's this 6,700 resistance level. Now, I still have a target, year-end target of the S&P 500 at 6,800 to 7,000. Once we get to that area, then you really need to start looking at the price structure. We may see a correction coming in the first quarter of next year, but then it will start to march back up. So right now, I'm still all in equities. 6,800 to 7,000 is the target for the S&P 500. VIX is trading at 16.44. Euro is trading at almost 17. It's 1.169. Oil is trading higher at $65.91 a barrel. BITO is trading at 18.815. Bitcoin is trading at 110. I'm a little surprised that Bitcoin is still trading, on the low side here. It should be above 120. Because the thought was if the Federal Reserve was lowering rates and the equities are going up, Bitcoin should be going up too. There's a lot of market manipulation in Bitcoin. It's not. There's no real fair value of the actual trading. There's too many big whales moving the price, and then when they stop, then it drops again. The Japanese yen is trading at 149.63. That's very positive for equities. If the yen continues to weaken, then there's higher probability the equities are going to go up. If you start seeing the yen get closer to 140 compared to 150, then you're going to see more stress in the international markets. Now, during the tariff hit, to prove my point, during the tariff hit of April, what did you see? You saw the yen starting to strengthen, getting closer to 140, and equities were tanking. So we're going to see, this is positive to see the VIX low, the Japanese yen depreciating. Those are all positive signs for equities to move towards that 6,800 to 7,000 mark for the S&P 500. Natural gas, early in the morning trading, pre-market trading was trading at 3.248 per million British thermal units, and started to trade down, and it's now trading at 3.137. There is a slow inch up. As we move into the fourth quarter of this year. We should see a 3.4 mark, maybe even a 3.5 mark for natural gas. And that ties into oil. Oil's a long ETF for natural gas. Coal, spelled with a K, is the short for natural gas. And oil is trading at 26.61. Intraday, it was trading as much as 28 point, not intraday, pre-market, 20.50, around 20.50. So it definitely, natural gas, you know, is moving up and down, but I think that over time, we're going to, especially in the fourth quarter, we're going to see closer to 3.4, 3.5 mark. All right, with that said, let's go back to Bloomberg here to talk about the UMich data.
Decrease, but overall consumer views continue to be quite subdued about the future of the economy. We're seeing this for all index components and across multiple dimensions of the economy.
What about inflation expectations? Because that's a big question here as we're looking for inflation to stabilize, but it still remains fairly sticky above that 3% mark. Excuse me, the 2% mark.
Inflation expectations for the short run ticked down just a little bit, but it still remains quite high, much higher than last year. For the long run, it ticked up just a little bit, lower than what we were seeing in April and May, but again, much higher than last year. We're seeing quite a bit of uncertainty over inflation. Consumers continue to be worried about tariffs, and this was before the announcement from yesterday of the extra tariffs that were being implemented. Consumers are still quite worried that tariffs are going to pass through the higher consumer prices in the future.
Joanne, we see the headline University of Michigan sentiment data came in at 55.1. Where would you like to see that? Where's a reading that would signify, hey, we're in good shape here?
65. We want to see several months of sustained improvements, and that's not what we've been seeing over the course of 2025. Over the course of this year, we've seen pretty dramatic declines, and then we've kind of been bouncing around in the 50s. This is not a strong reading, and for signs of confidence from consumers, we need to see an upward trend.
Very good, Joanne Shu. Thank you so much. We appreciate that, Joanne Shu at the University of Michigan. So coming up, we're going to have a discussion. Anne-Marie Gordon, a Bloomberg television anchor with the Egypt Foreign Affairs Minister Badr Abdelatty, talking about that part of the world. And it's been at United Nations Week. It's been a busy week for world leaders here, even in New York City in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen people come into the Bloomberg office. We've, of course, held the Bloomberg Global Forum where we got to speak with heads of state. Lots of pension fund guys running around because, they have to make their case to these government officials and kind of hear what the pattern is, what the trend is in terms of raising money.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, a busy week here in New York City with the United Nations General Assembly. A lot of news coming out this week, and a lot of government officials making their way. We're going to talk about it right now. The Egyptian Foreign Affairs Minister Badr Abdelatty speaking with Bloomberg television anchor Anne-Marie Gordon. Let's take a listen.
We welcome our viewers on television and radio for this important conversation as we've seen a ton of dialogue happen around this UN General Assembly when it comes to the changing geopolitical landscape. And I'm now joined by Egypt's Foreign Minister, Badr Abdelatty. Minister, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
You are part of one of the most significant meetings to take place at this UN with President Trump and other Arab leaders. What did the president tell you about how the U.S. sees the path going in terms of ending this war in Gaza?
Well, it was a very, very encouraging meeting. It was positive.
I want to pivot over to this UK digital ID that was announced yesterday. It's not, I believe it still has to pass through Parliament, but Starmer announced it. It was all over the BBC and last night's news on GB News. Lots of discussion about this. But before we play the video by the BBC, which is state-run, I want to give you my opinion about this concept that I brought up a long time ago, more than 5 years ago, about the Bio-Patriot Act, all right? And even the precursor to the Bio-Patriot Act. So the precursor to the Bio-Patriot Act is the Patriot Act that came right after 9/11, a big event, and then there was an overreach of government control. That was the Patriot Act. After 9/11, approximately, I want to say 2015, maybe 2014, the IMF published a white paper about decashing, how to decash society, and the benefits of decashing. That was the term at the time. Now we use these digital currencies and all this stuff, right? So at that time of 2015, and even Fareed Zakaria from CNN was promoting decashing back in around 2015. And I was against it because I thought that this was a means to control the society. When you couple it with artificial intelligence and blockchain, you have metadata, track and trace, and Minority Report all wrapped up in one. Minority Report meaning the movie from Spielberg. I think it was Spielberg that made Minority Report. That where there is such a thing as thought crime. And this goes all the way back to Orwell in 1984, thought crime, right? So you can have algorithms that suspect that certain crimes have higher probability at a certain area at a certain time of the day. They're using these algorithms now in New York City, in Chicago. All right, but these algorithms aren't so much tied to high-end AI. It's more lower-end machine learning and regression analysis, understanding behaviors of certain gangs, where they're located, what type of incidences happen, at a certain time in a certain location, and you can build a regression model. So it's more based on regression models. But these AI systems are getting more advanced. So if you have an event like unfettered immigration or a war in a certain region like Europe, or civil unrest between the natives and the illegal immigrants, it ushers in further policies by the legislative body that will lead to track and trace and control. So this digital ID that Starmer is going to issue, or is trying to issue and needs Parliament approval, is what I was warning people about in 2015 and definitely during the crisis of 2020 through the BioPatriot Act. Now, what is the BioPatriot Act? The BioPatriot Act was a concept where different legislations would take hold, where there would be vaccine passports, there would be a digital currency, there would be, if you are a dissident, you would be shut off from the banking system. There would be the method through a ledger to note where your money is being spent on. You could never take the money out of the banking system. Like right now, we have coinage and dollars. We can take, in theory, all of our money out of the system. But when you go 100% digital, you can't do that. So this digital ID is one element of the BioPatriot Act that I've been warning people about. That an event takes place, scares people, and the government goes for further control. So if you're a dissident, that the government doesn't like you, and even though you're following your constitutional freedoms, the government doesn't like you, they'll shut you off. Look at what happened with Freelander in Canada during the trucker protest. She used a digital system, PayPal, credit cards, and other means of transferring money, and shut down the actual truckers. And that's with a cash system. Because most of our transactions are done by credit card or bank card, and it's still digital. So they're going to continue on having this control on you. In addition, these ID systems are going to start knowing what your health is, what doctors you see, what your medications are, your health records will be tied to it. So a lot of things, a society needs to sit down and really think about, do we want the government to have that much control? I personally think no. And why do you really need it? Now, Starmer is saying you need this ID so businesses can verify that someone is a citizen so they don't get a job. So you're going to prevent, his theory is that you're going to prevent illegal immigration into the UK. Well, you're still going to have a black market for labor. And don't they have something like similar in the United States as a social security number? I would be shocked if they don't. I don't know if they have one or not, but I suspect they do. So they probably have a system already in place to verify if someone is a citizen or not. So why do you need another ID? It's a Trojan horse. Scare the people to get further control. And there'll be scope creep that happens. And this is an element of the Biopatriot Act, where your life in totality of the Biopatriot Act, if it was initiated in these Western countries, you'd have a vaccine passport that basically, if you don't do certain things, you will not be able to get a job if you don't have certain types of inoculations. It'd be 100% on blockchain. So it knows your spending in high fidelity. And it could shut the system down, shut you down, and prevent you if you aren't obeying the dogma of the day or the zeitgeist of the day by the government, from the government's point of view. Look at what happened during 2020 with Facebook and with YouTube. If you didn't push a certain narrative, you were canceled. You lost your channel or whatever. And that's benign compared to a full-blown Biopatriot Act. So the point that I'm making here is that if government has too much control, you will not be able to use your civil liberties to express your discontent. And therefore you have less control. But you're going to be safer, just like what Benjamin Franklin said. You take away your freedoms for safety, you don't have safety nor freedom. And this is exactly the point. Starmer is saying to his citizens, well, if you do this digital ID, you are going to be safer from illegals. We'll be able to stop the illegal immigration. And oh, by the way, this is being promoted by Blair, major globalist. It was under Clinton and Blair where globalization went on steroids and illegal immigration, all right, over time. But the point here is that Blair and Clinton were the leaders of that big push for globalization. Now, the beginnings of it were the liberalization of markets between Reagan and Thatcher. But it was really Blair and Clinton that really pushed what we would call this modern globalization. All right, so we have this potential problem that's starting to arise. You know, will the UK people, the citizens, push back on the government, push back on Blair, push back on Starmer, and prevent this digital ID? Because the digital ID is an element of this Biopatriot Act concept. Because if you have an ID, then you can link everything together. You can link your banks, you can link your vaccine, you can link your health, you can link your party affiliation, you can link everything. So if you are a dissident in the eyes of the government, there are means of shutting you off. This adds into this whole concept of social scoring. Now, this is not science fiction. Technologically, we can do this, and it is being done in China. People get low social scores. They can't use the train. They can't get a job. They can't use certain services. Blair wants you to use this ID where it allows you to log into the internet. So that they're tracking you there too. This is too much power for the government to have, any government to have. So don't fall into the same hoodwink tactic that was used during 9/11. They scared the soccer moms, where the soccer moms were willing to give more power to the national security state because they thought they were protecting their kid, their soccer kid, and not realizing that your constitutional freedoms are more important than your kid. Your constitutional freedoms, the Constitution of the United States is more important than anyone's life, more important than the President of the United States, more important than anyone in Congress, more important than you, more important than me, more important than anything. Why? Because it isn't it's a document that shows a rule of law and allows for freedoms for all. If you don't have that, it's going to be helter-skelter. So if you're giving away freedoms for safety, then you are saying that your life is more important than that document. And that's egoism. And that is not the ethos of what that document was all about. All right, so it's a problem. This is an element. Now maybe people will push back on Starmer and the digital ID is going to be dead on arrival. But it's not just Starmer that's pushing it. It's Blair, globalists. I'm telling you, people behind the scenes are pushing this. Why? Because they want your data. They want your data, and the government wants the control. And so now you build out all these really complex AI systems, and in real time they can not just track you, they can track 3 or 4 people that are tied to you. You know, directly, either 1 degree of separation or even 3 degrees of separation in real time. And then they could accidentally, through bad analysis, put you into a category where they may think you're a terrorist because you bought a sandwich at some sort of deli. This is not out of the realm of possibility. And how is a digital ID going to stop illegal immigration? Starmer thinks, well, if they can't get hired, they won't come. No, they'll still continue. They'll still continue. That's BS. Because what's happening is that they're trying to overrun the cities and have a caliphate. They're doing it on purpose. So you think a caliphate is going to be stopped by a digital ID? Really? Starmer? Really? Maybe you need to learn a little bit about, the Crusades, 1300s maybe. All right, whatever. Okay, let's play BBC. But before I do that, thank you for listening to my diatribe. But the Biopatriot Act is a serious problem. And and we have to take the lessons learned right after 9/11 and make sure that the government does not get powers that they should never have. Because once a national security state has those powers, it's very hard to get rid of them. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the toothpaste, get a few tubes of this toothpaste for your household. This is very high quality toothpaste. It will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with the health of your gum line, and reduce inflammation at the gum line. With good oral hygiene, you're actually helping your vascular system and your valvular system. Now, in the fall and the winter, because of the problems that are starting to arise with the wastewater, I don't need to get into detail, but there are going to be more prevalence of a problem in the fall and the winter. You need to take structural nanosilver to mitigate it. This toothpaste has structural nanosilver. So if you're brushing your teeth with structural nanosilver, don't you think you're mitigating something? Don't you think you're neutralizing something? And this is the reason why I keep on saying, use this toothpaste, because the other toothpaste that you're using, it's not as effective. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get this toothpaste. Be prepared for the fall and winter. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more on any order, you get a free gift until supplies last. And that free gift you are going to need to reduce the severity of what's coming in the fall and the winter. Now, I'm the most comprehensive person on this subject matter. Nobody in the whole world is better than I am. So you better listen to me, because what I have to say works.
Don't raise your voice to prove your rights. Focus your mind with every word of irrefutable fact you can find. Because conviction is the calm that comes when you know that you really do know.
If your pet goes from weird to weirder, drooly to... So Keir Starmer is expected to announce plans for a digital ID scheme, which will be compulsory in order to work in the UK. The government says it will take aspects of similar initiatives in other countries, including Australia, where digital ID is used to access private services, Estonia, where it's used to access children's records, and Denmark, where students can store information about their education. Also India, where it's claimed a similar system has saved billions of dollars in fraud. Civil liberty groups and opposition parties have raised concerns about privacy and said the measure will stop
where's the
people
scare tactic? Immigration and fraud. We got to put all your data out there, and then, all of a sudden, there's breaches, there's leaks, there are hackers that come out and steal your data, and then we're going to scare you and say, now because your data is digitized, you need to now go into a government ID system and we'll protect your data. Yeah, I guarantee you there'll be a leak. I guarantee you they'll have someone steal someone's data. There'll be a major breach. Where's the accountability? No one's accountable. Doesn't it make sense not to have the data digitized? But see, here's right there, just two elements of scare tactic to try to convince the audience that you need the digital ID. And we're not even 34 seconds in to the state-run TV called BBC.
Into Britain illegally. Well, speaking on the Today programme earlier on Radio 4, the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy clarified how the system would work.
From the end of this Parliament, every person in the UK will have a digital ID, and if you want to work in the UK, you'll be required to show proof of that through your digital ID. We think that's better for employers because at the moment it's far easier to fake papers. We think it's easier for them to be able to check that and know that what they're looking at is correct. And of course, there are huge fines. You can even face a jail sentence if you employ someone illegally here in the UK. So we think it offers protection for them, and it also...
All right, so let's say that they have fake Social Security. I don't know what they call it in the UK, but we have a Social Security. But let's say they fake it, all right? Well, you have to issue it to the government for employment because they have to pay taxes and all this stuff. So you don't hire them until it's all been checked out by the government. So why is their current system so porous where they can't verify a citizen? It should be that simple that the number and they're a citizen. All right, and we're already computerized, and they probably would know that number and that is a citizen with the name if the name matches, and where they live and where they're employed. And then all of a sudden, this person with that same number may have a different name or a different location, right? There's ways to see the fraud, is my point, with the current system. So why do you need a digital ID? The information's already digitized at the government level. You have a card, a number, it could be faked. But when you start entering it and you tell the government, we're going to hire this individual, could you please tell us that this individual is being truthful or not? The government should be able to say yes or no. with the current technology. No. We got to scare you to use a digital ID because Blair is pushing for more control. Now, if this is state-run TV, which it is, BBC, then MI6 and MI5 would love to have more information about its citizens. More information is better for national security state. Well, what about constitutional freedoms? What about the Magna Carta? Hell with the Magna Carta. It's all about the national security state and protecting you from terrorists.
Enables us to make sure that anyone who comes to this country who is working is doing so legally.
I want to get clarity, if I can, about whether this is compulsory. Now, you just said something important. Every person in the UK will have a digital ID. Are you saying, whether you like it or not, you will have an identity that the government has for you on a database, but you will have a choice as to whether you actually have that on?
Yeah, that's what they're saying. But it gets even better because society has become so dumbed down because of TikTok and 30-second dopamine hit that people can't even read a fucking book. So you really think that most people in society are going to really pay attention to the scope creep that Blair and Starmer is pushing? Probably not. Probably not. Because all you got to do is fear them. All you got to do is have, like, let's say, a terrorist attack in London. And then, boom, it pushes for ID. Everyone's going to go, oh, my God, we need to have this ID to prevent this from happening again. Meanwhile, it was probably a false flag by the MI6.
Mobile phone.
Yes, I think that's probably right. So every single person will have a digital ID and they'll have to have a digital ID, but they won't be required to use it on a daily basis. This is not like an ID card where you would be asked to show it as you're moving around. Many of the listeners will have been to other countries where you're required to carry an ID card at all times. That's not what we're proposing. It's not a card, it's a digital ID.
But someone could turn up at your
required to have it
factory
on your phone
office.
or carry it around.
Forgive me, but someone could turn up at a factory or an office and say, prove that you have a right to work here. Prove, in other words, that you have a digital ID. That would be effectively compulsory for all workers.
Well,
yeah, but why do you need the digital ID? All you got to do is show this is the number, and you give it to the government. Whatever you're in the United States, it's called a Social Security card. But the thing is that
What's the secret to peak health? Going micro with Noom.
I'm so tired of these advertisements. But the point that I'm making is there's a system that they already have. The government should be able to understand if they're a citizen or not. The problem may come in is that if they have the number and they have the same name that's in the database. But there's got to be means to be able to triangulate to see if that person is somewhere else in the country and currently working. Because obviously you won't be able to work in two different locations at the same time. You can't occupy two different spaces at the exact same time based on just current physics. So there's got to be a means to find this out if they are a fake employee or not, without issuing a digital ID. No, people don't want to work. People can't do the analysis. People don't want to work in the government. So we got to issue an ID that will have scope creep. And then you plug it into an AI system that could predict that maybe you might do a crime and therefore we're going to shut you off. These novelists, sci-fi movies, they've explored all this issue. And they basically have told the audience, this is a bad idea. It's a bad idea. And it's going to get to a point where people will buy into this. It will have mission creep. Your civil liberties are going to erode. And there will be one day, maybe 150 years from now, where the society says enough is enough, and they actually tear down everything and burn down the government. That's where this is going. This ties into whole transhumanism and humanism, or what I call monkism. It's the same idea. The whole idea is that you become more digital, your life becomes more digitized, you're more plugged into the Borg. There's different levels of transhumanism, where your existence or your ability to do anything must be predicated on digits. That's an element of transhumanism. You can get more advanced by actually being physically plugged in to the internet through, some sort of chip, or cut off a limb and you're bionic. Those are other elements of transhumanism. But where your life is curtailed based on digits, that is a certain level of transhumanism. And transhumanism will cut your civil liberty, cut individualism off, and you get plugged into a collective. This is exactly what Star Trek basically investigated in its writings and in its show with the Borg, where certain people were plugged into the Borg, and the Borg was a hive mind, and it was all about collectivism. There was no individualism. Isn't this what Ayn Rand warned us about? No, here's the problem. People can't read books, so they don't know anything anymore.
At a factory or a workplace and ask for checks to make sure that everybody who was there had the right to work in the UK, you wouldn't be required to have that with you at the time, but you would be required to have a digital ID and be able to produce that.
That's why I'm puzzled, you see. There are lots of arguments for digital ID, which have nothing to do with migration. For convenience, lots of countries like Estonia, India, all sorts of countries introduce them, save people time, they save people carrying papers around with them or dicking around, but that's not the government's argument. The government's argument is migration. You can be asked to show your papers now in a factory or in a workplace, or to go and find them. So what on earth difference is this going to make?
Well, first of all, it's a much more rigid system. At the moment, for example, you show you give your national insurance number to prove that you have the right to work in the UK. That's not linked to any kind of photo ID or anything else, so it's far easier to pass off somebody else's national insurance number as your own. We've seen a rise in the amount of identity theft and fraud, people losing documents only then to find that somebody else has taken over their identity. And I have many constituents who get in touch nowadays in a way that I didn't 14 years ago when I was first elected, saying that somebody has.
So it's going to stop. It's going to stop identity fraud. Really? Maybe identity fraud is going to increase. Because where the identity frauds really ramp up? When people start using digital systems. So they're asking to use more digital systems that can link lots more data together. And it's going to be protected by the government. The government is going to be so protective of your data. Really? Really? Look at the breach that took place with the IRS in the United States, and people's information was stolen. So this is not, the breaches aren't just private companies. It's government agencies.
To drive using their identity. Our argument is illegal migration. That is the thing that we're most concerned about. But we do also think this is going to have major benefits.
Lisa and Andy there being quizzed by Nick Robinson on the Today
Now, wait a minute
this
here.
morning.
We didn't need to use a digital ID to shut down the illegal immigration at the border of the United States. So why doesn't the UK do the same damn thing that Trump did? Protect the border. You don't need a digital ID. Oh, Blair doesn't want to do that because if you just shut down the border and stop the illegal immigration, you don't get scope creep with digital IDs. Now do you see the problem? Now do you see what they're really doing? The digital ID is a Trojan horse to allow for scope creep to control you and erode your civil liberties. And this is the very element of what I was complaining about back in 2015 and also in 2020 about the BioPatriot Act.
talk to our political correspondent to get a little bit more clarity about the nature of this digital scheme. But first, let's talk to Kieran Pedley, who's Director of Politics at the market research company Ipsos. Because, Kieran, you've been doing some research, you've been polling about this to find out how much public support there is. Firstly, let's start with the breadth of the research that you've done, because it was a relatively small research group. Just bring us up to date with how many people you were asking.
Good morning. So we've done a nationally representative poll of 1,100 Brits online, which is a pretty standard sample size for a poll of this kind. And we asked attitudes around ID cards, both sort of hard copies and digital, and also some of the reasons for and against support for them.
And thank you for clarifying that, because it's always important just to get the numbers out there. So in terms of a digital scheme, what kind of feelings were people sharing with you?
So I think that when we hit that first 1 million sales in our first year of business, it was surreal. This is definitely going to be a thing. So I think that if we're going to summarise the research in a sentence, what we'd see is that there is broad support for the principle of ID cards. But then when you put the arguments for and against them to the public and ask about digital ID specifically, the picture is more nuanced. So to put numbers to that specifically, 38% of the public say they support the principle of digital ID, 32% oppose. So more in support than oppose. But less than a majority, less than half in support. And the reasons for support tend to be around convenience and the ease of being able to prove your identity. Also, there's some specific.
This is exactly what Benjamin Franklin, who's a lot smarter than you or I, and he was self-taught. The average person, even if they have a Ph.D., is not as smart as Benjamin Franklin. All right? And Benjamin Franklin, 250 fucking years ago, basically said, do not give away your civil liberties for safety. Now, do you think the masses, when they do a survey, are going to have some sort of collective intelligence that's higher than Benjamin Franklin? I don't think so. Because usually, IQs go down when you start tapping into the population. The average IQ goes down, not up.
How combat illegal immigration, but there are concerns about data security and what would be on those cards too. So it's one of those cases where there's more in support than opposed, but the devil really is in the detail.
And it's that kind of detail that we don't have at the moment, which I guess makes your job very difficult. But when you then press people, what kind of questions were you asking them? Were you talking about, say, DNA information, or were you talking about other types of information that potentially could be on this digital ID scheme?
Well, I think when you think about digital ID, our polling at Ipsos shows there are two broad concerns that the public have that the government will have to address. One of them is about the government itself. Trust in government is pretty low at the moment. And so there are just over half of the public are concerned about the government's ability to roll out a scheme of this nature securely. On the information that would be contained on cards specifically, the public are pretty relaxed, it's fair to say, to have their photograph, their date of birth, perhaps information about their next of kin or their national insurance number. This is information people are reasonably relaxed about. But if this card was to include information such as your DNA, fingerprints, and perhaps sensitive information around your social security history or maybe your religious background, this is what concerns people. So again, we can give the headline numbers.
But it's a Trojan horse. There will always be scope creep. Always. Always. Not maybe. Always. So what happens is you have a digital ID for maybe 10 years, people get used to it, blah, 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 and they go, well, let's add in your medical records and it'll be easier for your doctor to assess your health. Ooh, you know what? There's a lot of advancements on being able to treat diseases if we know your genomics. Meanwhile, you have a government that's doing warfare, and the more you know about the genetics, the more you can target the bioweapons. I'm telling you, this is a bad idea. And it's an element of the Biopatriot Act that I've been complaining about for the last 5 years. And people are too stupid. People are too stupid to fight back. To say, no, we're not going to do this. And if you do it, we're going to burn down the parliament. People need to stop this crap. The same thing in my country, in the United States. If the government wants to keep on pushing this kind of stuff and erode our constitutional freedoms, it is our right and obligation to truncate the government and bring in a new government that follows the Constitution. No. But what happens is you got K Street that's bought by a bunch of billionaires. They're going to make a ton of money on this fucking shit.
More in support for this principle than oppose, and that is where the public are at today. There was sympathy with some of the arguments for this. But again, what matters is what information is going to be on this card and how is it going to be rolled out.
Yeah, the devil in the detail as always. Kieran Penny.
Oh, the devil in the detail.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And it's that detail.
Now think about it. Blair, who's no longer the prime minister. All right, but he was, prime minister during the Bush years, and I believe the tail end of the Clinton years. But he's like a Clintonite. He's a UK version of Clinton. All right, but Blair is pushing this. Why? What fund is he tied to? What sort of private investments is he tied to? Now, he's also the one that pushed the illegal immigration. He's also the one that pushed for, the UK needs to be heavily integrated in the EU. He was tied into, lose sovereignty and abrogate it to Brussels. That's Blair. Now, if this guy has this kind of mindset and this kind of history in politics, then don't you think that nefarious activities are going to happen with the digital ID? Especially down the road with scope creep? Of course. You don't need to have an IQ of 130 to understand that.
We are trying to analyse, and we've been hearing earlier on from Lisa Nandy. She was talking to Nick Robinson, my colleague, on the Today programme on Radio 4. Let's cross over to our political correspondent, Harry Farley, who joins us from Westminster. And Harry, it's that detail that we're kind of lacking in at the moment. Let's just start with whether this is going to be mandatory, because there was a question mark over that.
There was a question mark over that. So this will be compulsory in order to work in the UK, and that's the distinction that the government is making. So in order to get a job in the UK, you will have to have this digital ID card. So if, for example, if you're a pensioner, for example, or not working for other reasons, you will not have to have one. So it's not compulsory for absolutely everyone, and the government, that's one of the ways that the government is hoping to mitigate some of those concerns that, for example, the Liberal Democrats have expressed around.
So let me get this straight. For the ones that actually read 1984, they're getting ready to retire or are already retired. And so they don't need it. But the ones that can't read, that didn't read 1984, they don't know any better. So let's have the ID.
Be not having a smartphone, struggling with access to the internet and so on, being excluded from a universal compulsory system. This is compulsory in order to work in the UK. But so everyone, whether you're a UK citizen or not, in order to work, will have to have one. In terms of some other details that we do know, it will be held on people's smartphones, much like contactless mobile payments, for example, where you having a boarding pass when you board a flight. You'll have to have one in order to work by the end of this decade. The government wants to have this scheme up and running by the next election. You won't have to carry it with you at all times. You won't be asked to produce it in the street, for example, but you will just need it for those right to work tests. And in terms of those other details, the government admit that they're going to consult on this. There will be a 3-month consultation announced, and then there will be legislation that has to go through Parliament. This will require a new law to bring this out. So we're not talking about this happening immediately. This will happen, consultation for the next few months, and then likely legislation next year.
Yeah, they've got an awful lot to work out in terms of the detail, given that they want to implement this before the end of this political term, parliamentary term. But just in terms of the aspect of whether it's compulsory or not, I wonder, do you know, Harry, do we even know yet whether this is something that will be generated automatically, say like a national insurance number is, as we approach our 16th birthday many years ago, arguably for me, but when you get to that point, you automatically have a national insurance number generated. Is that where we are going with this, that then you don't have to have it on your phone? Or is it something that you opt into, so you have to apply for it?
It's a very good question, and to be honest, those kind of details will come in the consultation afterwards when we get the details of that legislation. But one of the other things the government's going to consult on is exactly how much information is going to be on these cards. You know, it's really interesting hearing about the polling there, about the levels of public support for the principle.
It's not the rollout. It's the scope creep that's the issue. Hello?
Kind of digital ID, but then concerns around, perhaps having some fingerprint data, some DNA data on there as well, and whether that reduces the public support. It's a really interesting question. Speaking to people in government last night, saying that is one of the things they're going to be consulting on. They're going to be asking the public and experts for their views on that. And that will also have a bearing on how much this will cost, for example, because obviously the more information attached to these IDs, the more it will cost. One of the things that a government advisor said to me last night is he said they are not at the moment thinking about linking this to medical records. So that's quite important to remember. They're not thinking of doing that at the moment.
Yeah.
And he also makes the case that he thinks that in the last 20 years or so since we last had this debate, the government's view is that the public have shifted and they are more used to having types of ID on smartphones, on digital devices. They're more open to that idea. And the government's argument is that, listen, this will have a fraction of the information that, say, the supermarket loyalty card has on it, and even smaller fraction than social media companies have about people. So their argument is that they think the public will support this, that attitudes to forms of identification have changed, and I hope this will have the public support. It's worth saying, though, it has united the other parties in opposition to this. The Conservatives and Reform say this won't help to clamp down on illegal working. That's one of the justifications for the argument. And the Liberal Democrats and others expressing concerns about civil liberties, and particularly those people who might be excluded, for example, who don't have a smartphone.
Harry, as always, thank you.
What happens when the scope creep happens? What happens when the scope creep happens and you fall in the category of a dissident group within your country and they shut you off and you can no longer travel or buy groceries or whatever, and you have a bad social score? Look at the problems that they have in China. All right? Then what are you going to do? What are you going to do then? I'm telling you, if governments keep on intruding on people's civil liberties, the people will rise up and there will be a revolution very similar to the French Revolution. And the ones that are in power, the oligarchs and the managerial class that's running the governments, they're literally going to have their head chopped off on a guillotine. Now, when that's going to happen, I don't know. Maybe 150 years from now. But the thing is that they're going against the civil liberties of their constituency. Now but we need to do it to keep you safe. Why not just stop the illegal immigration? No, we need to issue an ID. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. Vitamin C will help with your skin, but vitamin C and magnesium also helps with your immune system and your brain function. Super important. And oh, by the way, I've been telling you, because of the crisis of 2020, you're going to know about 30% of the people that are age 40 or older are going to be getting early onset of dementia. 75% of those people are going to have it due to ischemic dementia, either because of microclotting or microbleeding. 24.5% or so are going to get it because of amyloidosis, and about less than 0.5% will be getting it because of prion disease. So you better start protecting your neurons. Magnesium and zinc protects your neurons, helps with your immune system. You know, by the way, if you keep the inflammation down at the cerebral level, you're increasing your chances of neural health, positive neural health. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin C and magnesium and the magnesium and zinc. Boost up that neural health. But if you don't pay attention within the next 5 years, you start seeing this problem, don't be surprised. You've been warned. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the cleanse, which is 30 parts per million, or max 35, which is 35 parts per million. Use it the same way. Take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20-30 seconds, and then swallow it. What that will do is improve your oral cavity, your oral pharynx, help with your mucosal lining, help the health of your epithelial tissue, and by doing that, you're boosting up your immune system. Do that every day. I've been doing this for more than 5 years, every day. Now, if you're not feeling well, or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day and do the same thing until it's all clear. And then go back to your maintenance dose. Hit the max 35, prepare for the fall and the winter, or the cleanse. Again, cleanse is 30 parts per million, max 35 is 35 parts per million. They're at different price points. But you better be prepared for the fall and the winter. Because if you keep on getting this pulsing, you're going to start having your effective CD4 cells start to go down. Not the total CD4 count, but the effective CD4 count. How? Ooh, the S1 subunit actually attaches to the TCR. That's the T cell receptor, and it prevents the activation of your immune system. Oh, and it also produces a lot of cytokine, pro-inflammatory cytokines. So there's more inflammation. Then you wonder why that maybe dementia might be, early onset of dementia is going to increase. I'm telling you, don't pay attention to me. You're going to be in a world of hurt. A lot of hurt. Okay, let's listen into Fox News here about Comey. Comey, I should say.
Wild combos, massive battles, all-out blaster madness, and shot insanity from Zuru.
Wealthfront offers a cash account that has one of the highest interest rates on the market.
If I send my money to Wealthfront, I know that it's being taken care of.
Welcome to Hannity. We start tonight with a Fox News alert. Major breaking news tonight. Former FBI Director James Comey, or as he likes to describe himself, Mr. Higher Honor, has been indicted by a federal grand jury in Virginia. Comey is now facing 2 charges: obstruction of a congressional proceeding and lying to Congress. If he is convicted, he will face 5 years in prison on each count. President Trump writing on Truth Social tonight, quote, "Justice in America. Comey has been so bad for our country and is now at the beginning of being held responsible for his crimes against our nation." As I myself told James Comey right here on this show a long time ago, he has the right to remain silent. We'll remind him again. Take a look. By the way, the last thing we need are lectures from Jim Comey. And by the way, Jim, just a reminder, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. I think we're in better shape tonight. Anyway, I predict that tonight is only the tip of the iceberg. Pay very close attention as we go through this all throughout the show tonight. This is going to have a cascading effect. The same James Comey that protected Hillary Clinton and looked the other way when her team, we never heard of BleachBit, using BleachBit to clean their servers and acid wash them, basically. They were full of top secret classified information. Remember, he said no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute. Remember, there were phones that were smashed with hammers and SIM cards removed from phones as well. Oh, and Joe Biden, of course, had top secret classified information. He didn't get raided. Hillary didn't get raided. No reasonable prosecutor would prosecute. Only go after Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago and go into Melania's closet. Tonight, well, they are not getting away with covering their tracks like she did. Attorney General Pam Bondi tonight writing on X, quote, "No one is above the law. Today's indictment reflects this Department of Justice's commitment to holding those who abuse positions of power accountable for misleading the American people. We will follow the facts in this case." And, you know, let's take this time right now to remind you of some of the facts in this case. On this program, we have spent years uncovering, unpeeling every layer of the onion of the Russia hoax and the lie. And it took a small ensemble cast, some of which will be joining us tonight, to get to the truth. We have been vindicated by the Horowitz report, the Dover report, over and over again, newly declassified information. But as alleged in this indictment, count one, on September the 30th, 2020, nearly 5 years ago, during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, former FBI Director James Comey denied when asked that he had authorized the release of classified information to the news media by allowing a friend and a colleague of his to be cited as an anonymous source. Take a look at what Comey said that day. Take a look.
He then asked you, quote, "Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration?" You responded again under oath, no. Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, he's not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
Now, it turns out that appears to be a lie. Remember, Andrew McCabe leaked to the Wall Street Journal, we believe, at Comey's direction. Comey's own friend, a special government employee, Columbia Law School professor, leaking to the New York Times at Comey's direction. Now, on to count two. The numerous other false, misleading statements Comey is accused to have made in that exact same hearing. Comey was asked by Senator Lindsey Graham, who will join us in a minute, about a memo he received from the Director of National Intelligence, effectively making the investigation of Hillary Clinton's emails disappear, replacing it with the Russia hoax. Comey said he never remembered and no clue what happened. Watch this.
So do you recall getting an inquiry from the the intelligence community in September 2016?
The intelligence community, CIA, I mean.
The Clinton campaign was going to create a scandal regarding Trump and Russia.
I do not.
You don't remember getting a investigatory lead from the intelligence community? September the 7th. 2016, U.S. intelligence officials forwarded an investigative referral of FBI to FBI Director James Comey and Assistant Director of Counterintelligence Peter Strzok regarding U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's approval of a plan concerning U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections as a means of distracting the public from her use of a private email server. You don't remember getting that or being taught? That doesn't ring the
bells with me.
Okay. Doesn't ring bells with me. Okay. Well, that's a pretty stunning thing. It didn't ring a bell, but it did come to you.
Now, Senator Graham was on this program that very same night. I asked him whether or not he believed James Comey. Here's a reminder.
All I can say is he has a convenient memory. He remembers what is damning to Trump, and when something is helpful to Trump, it's like Sergeant Schultz was in charge of the FBI. I see nothing, I hear nothing, I know nothing. It's hard to believe that the director of the FBI, in charge of an investigation of a sitting president, wasn't told, oh, by the way, the subsource who prepared the dossier, we think it's a Russian agent back in 2009. It's hard to believe they didn't tell the director of the FBI. The subsource tells us that the dossier is bar talk, not reliable, take it with a grain of salt. It's hard to believe that they don't tell the FBI director the CIA has warned us that the dossier prepared by Christopher Steele and a suspected Russian spy is all internet rumor. So here's Comey's problem. If one person can come forward and say, I briefed the director about the problems with the subsource, I told the director that the CIA was worried about the reliability of the dossier, then he is in big time trouble.
And Mr. Higher Honor allegedly didn't just lie during that hearing. He also appears to have willfully lied to a FISA court several times, saying that he had enough verified information to warrant the surveillance of American citizens, starting with Carter Page, backdooring into all things Trump world. He never did. And remember, the FISA law mandates that if you present information to a FISA court to spy on an American citizen and later find out that information was false, the law requires you to go back to the FISA court and correct the record immediately. It does not look like that ever happened. In fact, if Comey and his friends could do it all over again, we'll learn from questioning of Senator Lindsey Graham, they never would have signed the FISA warrants. Why didn't they tell the FISA court that? Listen.
If you knew then what you know now, would you have signed the warrant application in June of 2017 against Carter Page?
No, sir.
Okay. If you knew then what you know now, would you have signed the warrant application?
No, I would not.
Well, I believe you didn't know that what you signed was wrong. The question is, if you had known, you wouldn't have signed it. Is that correct?
No, if I had known that it contained incorrect information, I certainly wouldn't have signed it.
Knowing then what you know now about all the things that we've come to find, would you have still signed the warrant application against Carter Page in October, January, and April?
No, I would want a much more complete understanding of what we were.
Thank you very much.
When you knew that, Mr. Higher Honor, why didn't you go back to the court? The current FBI director, Kash Patel, writing on X earlier this evening, quote, today, your FBI took another step in its promise to full accountability. For far too long, previous corrupt leadership and their enablers weaponized federal law enforcement, damaging once proud institutions, severely eroding public trust. Every day, we continue to fight to earn that trust back, and under my leadership, this FBI will confront the problem head on. Nowhere was this politicization of law enforcement more blatant than during the Russiagate hoax. A disgraceful chapter in history we continue to investigate and expose. Everyone, especially those in positions of power, will be held to account. No matter their perch, no one is above the law. You hear that, last part from the left all the time. No one's above the law, not even a former FBI director. Now, Comey's arraignment to face these charges will be on October the 9th. Earlier tonight, Mr. Higher Honor released this video on Instagram responding to the indictment. Take a look.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged. You are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
I'm afraid of him. He's a weird guy. As I said, I predict that this is only the tip of the iceberg. Be on the lookout for superseding indictments, other jurisdictions, potentially other charges.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.
Alrighty.
If your pet goes from weird...
Please go to my store at the-studio-reykjavik.com and get the collagen. The collagen will help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your your bone density, even your cartilage and joint health. Take it every day. You can take it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. But take it every day and do resistance training. Super important to help with your health. And Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive profile, compound profile. It's a powder. You take it every day. You take it the same way that you take the collagen. And this will target multiple systems. This will target your heart and your vascular system, your brain function, your musculature, energy levels, and rev up your metabolism. Super powerful powder that you should be taking every day to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Boomer Boost, stack it with the collagen. You know, it's a great way to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system and help your other organ systems, especially your brain. And by doing that, you're going to get rid of that brain fog. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll be able to concentrate. You'll be able to build up that neuroplasticity. And you stack that with a holistic approach, proper diet and exercise, doing resistance training, doing some cardio, doing stretching and balancing exercises, learning new things. These are all very positive to slow down the aging process and to boost up your immune system.
Welcome back. Former FBI Director James Comey expected to surrender today to authorities after being indicted on 2 charges. Those charges include false statements within jurisdiction of the legislative branch and obstruction of a congressional proceeding. Both alleged crimes relate to Comey's testimony during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing back in 2020 on the investigation into ties between Russia and President Trump's 2016 campaign. Here's a flashback from that hearing.
Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it.
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak.
I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
He won't characterize his testimony, but it's the same as what he said in 2017. Yes, and by the way, I've known for years that the Russia collusion story was a made-up lie, and now we are looking at investigators wanting to know why the FBI told the media about it. Comey is set to be arraigned on October 9th in Alexandria, Virginia. President Trump responded to the indictment on Truth Social this morning, writing this: James Dirty Cop Comey was a destroyer of lives. He knew exactly what he was saying and that it was a very serious and far-reaching lie for which a very big price must be paid. FBI Director Kash Patel wrote also on X moments ago. He writes this: the wildly false accusations attacking this FBI for the politicization of law enforcement come from the same bankrupt media that sold the world on Russiagate. It's hypocrisy on steroids. Their baseless objections tell us now more than ever that we are precisely over the target and will remain on mission until completion. FBI Director Kash Patel told me about all the weaponizations earlier this summer on Sunday Morning Futures. Watch.
I can speak to the folks that... Imagine your team only bigger, much bigger. Imagine a dedicated solution center, expanding your technical expertise. Imagine skilled MRO advisors, optimizing your workflow. Imagine a trusted...
I can speak to the folks that were in our seats, our predecessors, and they intentionally failed the American public by putting on the biggest DC deception game we've ever seen. They said the FBI was the most storied institution for law enforcement, and it was. And it will be again very soon. But when the likes of Comey and McCabe and Strzok and company came in here with the James Bakers of the world and intentionally lied to a federal court, only to rig a presidential election by lying to the American public and using taxpayer dollars, likely illegally, to fund this entire operation, and then withhold disculpatory information from a federal court that I used to appear before to manhunt terrorists, that's what broke the FBI. And then when they were caught, they lied about it.
Joining me now is former federal prosecutor and Fox News contributor Andrew McCarthy. Andy, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here this morning. First, give us your reaction to the indictment.
Well, I don't think there's a case.
you know, the things that Cash Patel that you just played that he was talking about that you and I have spoken about for years, Maria, the Russiagate stuff. I'm as big a critic of that probably as there is. I wrote a book about it. I think it was a disgrace, and history will remember it that way. This indictment is not about that, and it seems to be premised on something that's not true, which is that McCabe said that Comey authorized him to leak to the Wall Street Journal. If you look closely at what McCabe said was that he directed a leak to the Wall Street Journal and told Comey about it after the fact. So it's true that Comey never authorized it in the sense of okaying it before it happened. So I don't see how they can make that case.
What about the leaking in general? I mean, what about leaking a story that they may have known was a lie to the media? Because if you're the director of the FBI, you need the evidence to say, yeah, I mean, you know, for years, congressmen and lawmakers were trying to understand, Devin Nunes, John Radcliffe, trying to understand what's the origins of this investigation. So what was the origins of Russia collusion with Trump? And so they never really had any evidence of it, but they leaked it to the press.
Yeah, but that's not what this case is about. I totally agree with you if you were talking about the information that was provided to the FISA court that claimed that Trump was in collusion with the Kremlin, but that's not what this case is about. What this case is about is Comey is accused of lying because what Ted Cruz said, and this, yeah, right, and what Cruz said, and I think this was just a garble on his part, was that Comey authorized McCabe to orchestrate the leak. And what the Inspector General found, and this isn't even just what the Inspector General found, this is McCabe's own version of events.
Right.
McCabe said that he directed the leak, and he told Comey about it afterwards. Now, they have a dispute about what exactly McCabe told Comey afterwards, and whether Comey was approving or disapproving of it. But the charge is that Comey authorized the leak, and he didn't authorize the leak.
I see. Well, the judge assigned to this case is a 2021 Biden appointee, Judge Michael Nachmanoff. What are your thoughts on that and what the grand jury will be looking at?
Well, I think it's a shame, and I should preface this, Maria, just so cards are on the table. I know Comey for 40 years. I like him. I was in the office with him. I've been a pretty severe critic of his throughout the Russiagate stuff, but on legal stuff, I try to be clinical and call it as I see it.
Yeah.
So I think this judge should throw the case out, but I'm afraid that he won't throw the case out because everyone will say he's a Biden judge and the fix is in. So it's probably, I mean, even though I wouldn't want to go through it myself, it's probably better if there's a trial and the jury acquits him, but this case should be thrown out.
I see, because of what McCabe said. What about the other charge of obstruction, Andy?
Yeah, the obstruction charge is based on the premise that Comey lied to the committee, and the lie to the committee is premised on count one, which is what we've been discussing. So I think if the perjury count goes, the obstruction count has to go as well.
I see. And in terms of any other potential criminality in this huge story of Russia collusion, how it ripped the country apart, is there any other criminality that you see, Andy?
Well, I think at this point, Maria, it'd be hard to indict a lot of this stuff because of the statute of limitations. You know, most of the things we've been talking about occurred in, 2016, 2017. They went after Comey on this because it's within the 5-year, barely within the 5-year statute of limitations, which runs, I think, next Tuesday. Right. So it's going to be hard to reach back into the real problem here, which was the Russiagate stuff and the misrepresentations that were made to the FISA court in that connection. But that happened in 2016-17. It was thoroughly investigated by Durham. I know people are unhappy with what the bottom line of all that was, but it's very hard at this point to go back that far and have a case that's a live case.
And of course, that's something that Carter Page would like to see, since he was totally tangled up in that FISA abuse. Andy, great to get your take on this. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Marie.
All right, Andy McCarthy joining us.
All right, this is the government shutdown.
Yes, and now it is up to the judicial system. President Trump responded to the indictment on Truth Social this morning. He writes this: James Dirty Cop Comey was a destroyer of lives. He knew exactly what he was saying, and that it was a very serious and far-reaching lie for which a very big price must be paid. Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Richard McCormick. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. And Jim Comey is set to be arraigned on October 9th in Alexandria, Virginia. He's expected to turn himself in today. Your reaction to the indictment?
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting that he was playing the victim now and he kind of started this whole misinformation. This is what happens when you play politics with one of the most powerful agencies in government. He's been messing with the truth for a whole long time, and now I think he's going to suffer the consequences.
Well, I mean, part of the messing with the truth was pushing this idea that President Trump, or then candidate Trump, was colluding with Russia. And as the director of the FBI, he should have known better, right? I mean, he would have known if he actually had evidence of that or if he was just pushing a made-up story.
I'm looking forward to exposing all of the truth, not just partial truths. This is what he's been really guilty of, in my opinion, and I know this is not a court of law, but really if somebody who's picked and choose what information to release and when and who's actually legitimate and who's not, now he gets to be judged in front of all of us for what the real truth will be.
So I wonder if you read into anything about the judge being chosen here, because I know that, you know, now it's up to the grand jury, but we should also point out that the James Comey case just got assigned to a Biden-appointed judge, according to Politico. Judge Michael Nachmanoff has the case now. So what does that tell you, that it's a Biden-appointed judge?
It worries me a little bit because we've seen how jaded the administration, the Biden administration was when they chose their lawyers. They weren't constitutionalists. But at least this will be played out in front of the public. So we all get to judge for what information is presented. And a lot of times people don't get punished, but at least will be exposed. And that's what I want to see, is the truth come out.
Congressman, let me switch gears, ask you about the business at hand on the budget and funding. There's just one legislative day to go to avoid a government shutdown. And your colleagues on the left in Congress are downplaying the warnings from the White House that a shutdown of government will cause large-scale layoffs. They're now using the shutdown as political leverage. They launched a wave of ads targeting GOP incumbents over government funding and tariffs. House Speaker Johnson wrote this on X: Democrats are holding the American government hostage in an attempt to give free health care to non-citizens, which was just outlawed by Congress. Which was just outlawed by Congress. This is not governing. It's putting illegal aliens first and Americans last. The government, of course, is set to run out of money on Tuesday and could shut down Tuesday night, September 30th. What are you expecting?
If it shuts down, this is Schumer's shutdown. Let's be clear. We passed in the House. They should have passed this in the Senate. It's so ironic when the Freedom Caucus is actually asking for a continued resolution for basically a Democrat bill. A bill that, by the way, I would like to mention in December got universal support from Democrats. I voted against it. I don't like CRs. And in December, I said, no, we're spending too much money. But what I realized was this is the best deal we're going to get. It is a built-in compromise. It is from the Democrats originally. For them to say we're going to shut down the government because we're not getting any kind of compromise is not an honest argument. I think that people are going to see right through it. Even when I was previewing CNN, MSNBC, and they all agree that this is a bad move by the Democrats. I think it's going to backfire drastically.
Well, I mean, look, what do they want here? I mean, Andrew Clyde, your colleague in Congress, talked to us about the subsidies that were given out during COVID. Is that the crux of it? Is that what the Democrats want now in order to agree not to shut down government?
Yeah, it looks like about $1 trillion worth of subsidies in healthcare. That's going to go basically straight to profit for insurance companies. We're looking at about a 9% increase in premiums next year because they are so fat, dumb, and happy in the insurance agencies, which are, by the way, about 4 of the top 10 Fortune 500 companies in America, making immense profit off of still denying about a third of all claims for healthcare. I mean, this is an industry that's been busy behaving. I know President Trump's been addressing pharmaceuticals, PBMs, insurance companies. Watch out, you're next. Don't do it. This is bad business, and I think the president is paying close attention.
Well, you recently introduced the Incentivized Savings Act to address the fiscal trajectory. Tell us about that.
I'm super excited about this. I think your listeners are going to love this because how many times have we talked about over the decades? And when I was in the military, I talked about all the time, we get to the end of the fiscal year, if we don't spend everything in our budget, I lose it and somebody else spends it, and I need a smaller budget the next year. So I have two sticks to do the wrong thing. It's an absurd way to approach any kind of spending, yet we've been doing it since the beginning of government. My bill is simple. You get to the end of the year, if you don't spend it, you're managing your budget appropriately, 49% of that leftover actually goes towards next year's budget. You actually get a bigger budget, rewarded first, and then you can buy maybe a computer or an upgrade or some other thing that you need that you can afford this year. Another 49% of that leftover goes back towards debt and deficit, not to the president, not to the speaker, not anywhere else, but back towards something we need to pay down because we're so far over in our spending. And then the remaining 2% goes to bonuses for everybody in that department, up to 10% of your salary is retention bonus. So I'm going to give you 3 carrots to do the right thing instead of 2 sticks to do the wrong thing. I think it's brilliant. The speaker loves it. Looking forward to President getting it passed.
All right, we'll be watching that. What about the global affairs agenda? President Trump met with Turkish President Erdogan in the Oval Office yesterday. First time he's done that since 2019. The president urged Turkey to stop buying Russian oil. Watch this.
I'd like to have him stop buying any oil from Russia while Russia continues his rampage against Ukraine. And they've been fighting. They've lost millions of lives already. And for what? For what? It's disgraceful. And I said yesterday, let it keep going because their economy is absolutely terrible right now.
Congressman, your reaction, I mean, it's incredible to me that even Europeans are complaining about Russia and its attack on Ukraine, and yet they're funding it by buying the oil.
Since the beginning of this war. And I remember as a NATO parliamentarian, we actually passed legislation saying, look, we can seize Russian assets and use it against them. We had 8, last time I counted, 8 countries in Europe funding this war by buying LNG, oil, precious metals, all kinds of commodities from Russia. Russia shouldn't have any business with the good guys. We are literally funding the war against ourselves. Shame on us. We need to do better. I think this is a great way to call leaders out, and not just Turkey, by the way. Several countries in the European Union have been doing the same thing. It needs to stop now. We need to end this war, put the thumb screws down on Russia, and make it stop.
Yeah, by the way, this week at the UN, we just spoke with Hillel Neuer, UN Watch Executive Director. What did you make of all that sabotage? The president goes on the escalator, it stops. He's reading from the teleprompter, it stops. Then we're told that some of the audio of the president's speech wasn't heard from a big group of people. Was someone at the UN trying to sabotage President Trump this week?
Well, it's really hard to say, but I will say this. I'm not a big fan of the UN. Since I was in the military in 94, they left Rwanda. We came in, we watched 1 million people die. 1 million people died because the UN didn't do their job. They've been corrupt. They've shown all kinds of bias against the United States, against Israel. They're not on our side. And that's why they're really in jeopardy of losing funding. And they already have lost some funding. They're not a straight-up organization. We have to keep a close eye on them. They have some utility, but don't trust them, that's for sure.
Well, probably not a good idea to play games with President Trump while he was riding the elevator and reading his script at the UN if, in fact, the funding is already in jeopardy because of an ineffective agency. And then you've got these political tricks. Congressman, thanks very much. Good to see you. We'll be watching all of that. Richard McCormick joining us this morning. And see you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. This will help with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. It brings down inflammation and helps your lipid profile. Take it every day. It's dual purpose. Super important. If you're 40 years of age or older, you need to start protecting your neurons. Take NAD+. NAD+ boosts up your NAD+ levels, increases your energy, helps to repair DNA damage, and protects neurons. Super important. Ubiquinol, the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can purchase. If you're taking CoQ10, chances are you're probably taking the wrong kind. You can't get anything better than this. Now, ubiquinol will soak up free radicals, reduce stress in the cell, slow down the aging process, help the health of the mitochondria. You'll have more energy, and it will protect your neurons. Stack this together to protect your neurons. It's really important. By the way, within the next 5 years, about 30% of the people that you know that are 40 years of age or older will probably get early onset of dementia. 75% of them, 75% of the 30% are going to have issues with clotting, microclotting, or microbleeding. 24.5%, maybe a little bit more, will have amyloidosis, building of plaques in the brain. And less than 1%, less than 0.5% actually, less than 0.5% will be tied to prion disease. And that's because of the crisis that we went through in 2020. So if you don't bring down inflammation, if you don't start protecting your neurons, if you don't start looking at this in a holistic way, you're increasing your chances of having early onset of dementia. All right, we're going to go to Niall Ferguson. He's going to talk about the Cold War.
Of this directly to President Zelensky in the past is to be South Vietnam, to be a country that has support from the United States for a time, but then the support runs out, a peace is agreed, but the peace isn't stable, and in the end, South Vietnam in 1975 vanished.
Do you have an opinion how to actually end this war?
I do. I think you have to break the question up into two parts. Ukraine can keep the war going. It can deny Russia victory by an extraordinary combination of technological ingenuity and human courage. And that is why the war is still going, and I think can keep going. But that's only part of what has to happen. To end the war, that requires pressure on Russia that Ukraine alone cannot exert, even with its deep strikes into Russian territory. That means that the United States, plus its European and other partners, must impose much tougher and more effective sanctions on the Russian economy to raise the cost to Vladimir Putin of continuing this war. And that has not yet happened. There still is not sufficient pressure on Russia's oil exports, nor has there been sufficient pressure to reduce exports to Russia through third countries, from European economies mainly. So that's the only way I think this war can be ended. It can be kept going by Ukraine, but it cannot be ended without external pressure on Russia. Yes, there are some stresses and strains in the Russian economy, as you would expect, as we are in the fourth year of a war which has more than doubled Russian military expenditure. But if you look at the state of the Russian economy, the most striking thing is the extent to which they have successfully increased their armaments production. It's very impressive if one looks at the statistics, and I think they check out on the battlefield. And they've done that without impacting Russian living standards. In fact, real wages and consumption and retail spending are all up significantly since the war began. So anyone who thinks that the Russian economy is on the point of collapse is deluding themselves. The reality is that the Russian economy, despite the obvious weakness relative to the Soviet past, is still capable of ramping up military production and sustaining this war effort. Let me add one other crucial point. Without Chinese support, financial as well as in the form of dual-use technology, it would be much harder for Putin to continue this war. And that Chinese backstop has been much more consistent than Western aid to Ukraine. because Western aid to Ukraine has been subject to the vagaries of American politics. In effect, the war is now a European enterprise because American military and financial aid have stopped. But China continues to support President Putin, and Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, consistently affirms the strength of his relationship with Putin. So that is the other reason why Russia's economy is not about to fall apart.
But is it possible to actually do something about the Chinese support? Because we saw a few weeks back with Kim, Xi, Putin, even Modi hugging it out at the Shanghai summit. It looks like Europe doesn't actually have the necessary power to pressure China to stop this support, right? And the US doesn't want to do it.
This is the central problem from a geopolitical and geo-economic point of view that Ukraine faces. Its struggle with Russia is part of a global struggle. On one side, you have the Chinese, Russian, Iranian, and North Korean economies. You can call them the axis of authoritarians or the axis of upheaval, but they are a functional axis, engaged in all kinds of military and economic cooperation. And on the other side, you have what we used to call the West. But when you look closely at the West, it's actually quite divided. There isn't consistent strategic purpose. The United States is very reluctant to impose direct costs on Russia or indeed on China. President Trump seems to want to sort these problems out with high-level summits, first with Putin, now he hopes next with Xi Jinping. I'm very skeptical that these summits are going to produce any concrete results. From China's point of view, this war is the gift that keeps on giving. The Chinese are selling drone components and drones to both sides. So they have no incentive to stop this war, and nor does Russia, because I think Putin calculates that eventually the superiority of resources in terms of GDP and manpower will give him victory, even if it costs another million Russian soldiers dead and wounded. He therefore has no incentive to settle. And this is the problem Ukraine can do nothing about. Ukraine can keep this war going with ingenuity, courage, but you can't end it unless there's a fundamental shift in the geopolitical alignment, which I don't see.
I want to remind you that we have a membership program at the Kyiv Independent. Supporting the Kyiv Independent allows us to do the videos like this and report on the war in Ukraine. Thank you.
Judging by what you...
Those who answer the call of the vagabond know that the best stories aren't about where you went. They're about how you got there. So,
judging by what you said, is the West, if there's still a West, is playing catch up because basically the Axis, whatever we call it, is united, is strong, and has its purpose, and Europe alone can't do anything about it, and we're still really dependent on the mood swings in Washington.
As you know, as every Ukrainian knows, this war is a war of hardware, of drones and drone defenses, of all kinds of very complex, but still relatively cheap forms of weaponry. And if one looks at the global economy, there is no question which economy dominates the production of drones and drone components, and that is China. China's manufacturing value added is roughly twice that of the United States of America. It's double the manufacturing capability of the United States. Europe isn't close. Europe can just about match Russia's defense production. So the problem is that Europe, which now is the principal source of support for Ukraine, is far behind the United States and China in terms of its defense capability. Europe roughly needs to double, perhaps more than double, its defense capability. Now, the good news is that President Trump succeeded in persuading the Europeans to increase their defense spending, and that is good, and it's long overdue. The bad news is that Europe is constrained in, I think, 3 different ways. Number one, it doesn't really have the kind of strength in defense technology that the US and China have. It's far behind, particularly in the most sophisticated kinds of weaponry. Number two, the public finances of most European countries are in very bad shape. France, it's a mess. The UK, it's a mess. Italy, don't even go there. Only Germany has fiscal capacity. And that is a real constraint on how many resources can be mobilized for large-scale European rearmament. And finally, populist parties are in the ascendant in all the major economies, and most of the minor ones too. A party called Reform UK is far ahead of the governing Labour Party in the UK. The same is true in France, where the Rassemblement National is far ahead of President Macron's party. And in Germany, the Alternative for Deutschland is basically neck and neck with the governing CDU. And these parties are not particularly keen on support for Ukraine. In some cases, they seem to show sympathy for the Russian side. So these are the problems, again, beyond Ukraine's control, that I think are really constraining the amount of resources that can be made available to ending this war.
Since we're on the topic of Europe, recently, last week, Poland was attacked by Russian drones. We had Mr. Sikorsky saying that it was a successful operation of downing the drones, even though not all of them were down. People in Ukraine see this as Russia probing European defenses, say a salami tactic where they do something, they see the reaction, there's no reaction, they increase the pressure. And people in Ukraine as well, they think that Russia was successful in probing NATO defenses, and NATO didn't push back against Russia in any tangible way. Does this send a signal to Russia that it can attack NATO countries, it can meddle with their internal affairs, and it won't face any repercussion for that?
I don't believe that President Putin's goals are simply to acquire more territory from Ukraine. I don't even think he would be content with breaking Ukraine as an independent democratic state. His ultimate objective is to break NATO and to show that NATO is no longer real, that the language of Article 5 is a dead letter. How can he achieve this? Well, he can achieve this not just by winning the war in Ukraine, but then by expanding Russian aggression into NATO member states and showing that it doesn't elicit a united response. And it's not just the drones that entered Polish airspace. There have been other provocations. There are other ways Russia is pushing the envelope, for example, in the Baltic area. And I think it's highly concerning that the NATO response, particularly to the most recent Polish events, has been so weak. One of the lessons of the original Cold War, when it was the Soviet Union on the other side, was that you could not let that kind of aggression pass without at least strong language implying some kind of retaliatory risk. We're not doing that. And we consistently, I think since February of 2022, I would actually say since 2021, failed to be sufficiently strong in our responses to acts of Russian aggression and provocation. It's as if we've forgotten the language of deterrence and replaced it with the language of de-escalation. But anybody who's ever been in a fight, in a pub or in the schoolyard knows that when somebody slaps you in the face, you don't win the fight by saying, let's de-escalate. And so this is the problem. We've forgotten the basics of deterrence. And my urgent message to NATO's leaders, as well as to the leaders of the NATO member states, is you have to do more. You have to show the Russians there is a price for a sustained violation of Polish airspace. And that price must be paid in ways that are meaningfully costly to the Russian war effort in Ukraine.
During the Second World War, there was an appeasement.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water. This will bind to those toxins and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Do that every day to improve your different bodily functions, including your immune system and endocrine system. Also, get some dual-purpose deodorants. They're for males and females. You can get it in citrus or in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, made from essential oils from the Himalayas, has no aluminum, no baking soda, all natural ingredients. It will help to detoxify your body, and you use it as a deodorant. And detoxifying your body is really important. To be prepared for the fall and the winter, get the gel. Super important. It's dual purpose. You can use it as an aftershave. You can put it on your skin daily as a daily skincare. You can put it on a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, and it'll help to heal it quicker. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, lightly coat your nostrils. It'll stay active for 5.5 hours. Please go to my store and get the gel. Be prepared for the fall and the winter.
Slogan, why die for dancing, right? Do you think Europeans and Americans would be willing to die for Narva, for example, if Russia enters Estonia?
Well, formally, they have to be. That's the whole point of NATO, that an attack on one is an attack on all, and there will therefore be a coordinated alliance response. If it turns out that that's no longer true, then we are back to the pre-NATO world when it was possible for aggressors to pick off European countries one by one. Czechoslovakia, 1938, Poland, 1939. We all know the history. But as an historian, the tragedy of my career is that I've spent years of my life writing books and articles and giving lectures and classes and seminars about these issues, trying to communicate to the next generation the simple truths about great power politics, as well as economic forces in history. And it's as if I might as well not have bothered. We've reached the point when Tucker Carlson can invite people on his show who argue that the real villain of World War II was Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was the hero of World War II because there was one man who argued against refusal consistently, even when it was unpopular. So it's very frustrating for me to see so many of the lessons of history apparently forgotten. And I have to say, it's urgently, vitally important for Western leaders, and I include the President of the United States in this, to push back against false narratives of history. Because these false narratives very rapidly lead you back to the isolationism that was such a disaster for the United States in the 1930s and culminated at Pearl Harbor, as well as the appeasement that failed so miserably in Europe in 1938-39.
Do you see historical parallels with the current situation, with maybe the Second World War or any other historic events?
Part of the danger in historical discussion is that sometimes certain historical analogies get overused. So every dictator is Hitler, every crisis is Munich, is Czechoslovakia in 1938. I'm not sure that's really the right analogy for the situation in Ukraine. In some ways, it's much more reminiscent of the Korean War, in the sense that you've got a very clear act of aggression that elicits an international response and then produces a military stalemate with a very, very dangerous extended frontier. And then you have peace negotiations, which are extremely hard to progress. It's hard, in fact, for me to imagine how we would arrive at peace anytime soon under the present circumstances. A good outcome for Ukraine would be to be South Korea. In many ways, it already is South Korea. You can see this in the incredible advances in Ukraine's defense technology, something South Korea is still world famous for, but also the progress that Ukraine has made towards being a democracy with a strong sense of identity. In fact, it took Korea much longer to get to democracy than Ukraine. So that feels like a better analogy. The nightmare scenario, and I've said this directly to President Zelensky in the past, is to be South Vietnam, to be a country that has support from the United States for a time, but then the support runs out, a peace is agreed, but the peace isn't stable, and in the end, South Vietnam in 1975 vanished, 2 years after a peace agreement had been reached. That's the nightmare scenario. I think these analogies are more helpful than World War II analogies because we're actually in another Cold War. This is a Cold War as cold as the Cold War that began in the late 1940s. It's just that China has taken the place of the Soviet Union. In other respects, the cast of characters is somewhat similar and the central problems are fundamentally the same problems.
I know historians don't really like to give predictions, but since we're talking about the current situation, what needs to be done, and what's not actually happening. Do you have a sense where this is all going? How we will see the world end up, say, next year or in the upcoming years?
Predictions are all very well, but I actually think actions are preferable. A year ago, I went to Berlin and strongly argued that the approaching government of Friedrich Merz should relax the debt brake and engage in large-scale rearmament. And that has happened. Now, the next step is to make sure that that rearmament is the right kind of rearmament, that is to say, that the money is spent on the right weapon systems, and secondly, that it happens fast enough to influence the outcome in Ukraine. So I'm not particularly interested in making predictions at the moment. The reason that I'm here is to try to contribute to the drastically needed upgrade of European strategy. This is Europe's war now, but Europe is not doing what it needs to do to help Ukraine win it and end the war. So that's what we have to change.
Do you think it ever will do the right thing?
I think it's possible. I think things are moving rapidly. Germany has great manufacturing capabilities. It does not have fiscal constraints in the way that France and Britain do. And I think Friedrich Merz understands how urgently Germany needs to transform its strategic framework. He spent years opposing Angela Merkel's Ostpolitik with Russia. Now he has a chance to put those arguments into action. The constraints on him, I think, are partly his coalition partners, the Social Democrats, who have never been, I think, sufficiently committed to Ukrainian victory. But I remain of the view that if we give him encouragement, and if he has other European leaders on his side, then Germany has the capacity to make a major contribution. What are the two words you least want to hear if you are a Russian dictator? I'll tell you, German rearmament. That is happening. There's going to come a point, if it's done right and it's done fast enough, when Vladimir Putin will realize that he has made the biggest strategic mistake in modern Russian history by reawakening Germany as a military power.
If your pet goes from weird to weirder, grouchy to grouchier, thumpy to thumpier, shaky to shakier, day or night, if you don't know what's wrong, know where to go. Veg, the better, kinder ER for pets.
And through a very clever active defense and maneuver warfare of the kind we haven't seen really since the Kursk invasion, they established a blocking line to stop the
nightmare scenario, and I've said this directly to President Zelensky in the past, is to be South Vietnam, to be a country that has support from the United States for a time, but then the support runs out, a peace is agreed, but the peace isn't stable, and in the end, South Vietnam in 1975 vanished.
Do you have an opinion how to actually end this war?
All right. There is this.
I do.
They did two videos.
The question.
You just branded it different titles, unfortunately. Let's listen into CNBC.
Hi, Carl. Indeed, these are final reads for September on University of Michigan sentiment and inflation numbers and expectations for some improvement. The reality is each one deteriorated on growth. 55.1 from 55.4 is the headline number. It's still the weakest going back to May. If we look at the current conditions, 60.4 versus the mid-month read of 61.2, also lower, but it doesn't change the comp back to May. And if we look at expectations, from 51.8 mid-month to 51.7, still the weakest since May as well. And on the inflation front, very similar, but in a positive way. We're expecting 4.8 on the one-year inflation, 4.8 was last look. The mid-month it comes in 4.7. And the 5 to 10 year inflation, instead of 3.9 mid-month, it moves to 3.7. 3.7 would be comping to 3.5 in February. So the growth with respect to what's associated with when you look at Michigan sentiment, well, much of it's supposed to reflect the equity market. It's downgraded just a bit from the last 2 weeks. But if you look at the inflation indicators, they also moderated a bit. The market hasn't moved a lot on them, kind of a wash. And how do we summarize? Well, right now, 418 on a 10-year is up about a basis point on the session, but it settled at 413 last week, so it's down 5. And if you look at a 2-year, it settled at 257 last week. It's down almost 10 basis points on the week. It is virtually unchanged on the day. We did have good income and spending, and the PCE numbers rather sticky. Sarah, back to you.
Hey, Rick, thank you very much.
Imagine your team only bigger, much bigger.
And I think basically what Trump is doing, and he's been doing this for a couple weeks now, is he's pulling back and he's telling the Europeans and the Ukrainians the ball is in their court and they have to settle this one with the Russians, however they choose to do so. Remember, he says that he's going to give Ukraine the weapons via NATO. And what NATO does with those weapons is up to NATO. He's not going to tell them what to do. So Trump is, in effect, washing his hands of this conflict, and he is protecting himself for when Ukraine loses on the battlefield. He does not want to be in a position where people can say Donald Trump withheld aid for Ukraine, and that's why they lost. He's optimistic. He thinks they can win. He's going to give them the wherewithal through NATO to see if NATO or the European Union and Ukraine together can pull Ukraine's chestnuts out of the fire. But don't say that Donald Trump didn't do his best to help this situation. That's kind of what's going on here.
Look, what he's doing is classic burden-sharing politics dressed up as strategy. He shifted the practical work onto NATO and the Europeans while preserving political cover at home. From a pure risk management perspective, that makes sense for a leader who's worried about domestic blowback if things go wrong. But from the standpoint of Ukraine's battlefield needs, shifting the burden doesn't magically fill the manpower, industrial, or air defense gaps Ukraine faces. The result, more pressure on partners and more uncertainty about outcomes, which is where we are now.
Trump is not talking publicly about imposing sanctions on the Russians. Without sanctions, I mean, where is this going? And he understands that sanctions is an important argument here. And he understands that he's going to get blamed for not putting sanctions on the Russians. So how did he deal with that? He said to the Europeans, you have to put sanctions, and of course we're talking about secondary sanctions here, which means sanctions on India and China. He said, I'm willing to put sanctions on India and China, but I'm not going to do it alone. The United States alone is not going to pay the price. This is America first. You Europeans have to go along with us. And as soon as you put secondary sanctions on the Russians, which again is sanctions on India and China, I'll put secondary sanctions on. But of course, he knew full well, and he's been proved correct, that the Europeans are not going to put secondary sanctions on China and India. So he doesn't have to put it on, and he could say later, I was willing to do it. It's just that the Europeans, who make all this noise, wouldn't do it themselves. And I was not going to make the people in my country pay the price. So he's protected himself there, as well as on the dimension of fueling or sending weapons to Ukraine. He's continuing to send weapons to Ukraine. And by the way, he's making the Europeans pay for those weapons, which is something that satisfies his base. So I think if you put aside these wild and crazy comments about how Ukraine can win and what a paper tiger Russia is and so forth and so on, I think Trump is basically following the game plan that you and I defined a while back.
That's the political trade-off. Keep domestic supporters happy while getting partners to pick up the tab. It stabilizes you at home, but increases strategic fragility abroad. If Europe can't sustain the pace of support, Ukraine's battlefield calculus changes fast. Not because of rhetoric, but because of logistics and industrial capacity.
Listen, when the United States was operating in Ukraine under Joe Biden, we had the pedal to the metal. We were doing a great deal to help Ukraine win the war. And Ukraine could not win the war with all that European support and all that American support. Well, once the Americans under Trump begin to backtrack and shift the burden onto the Europeans who have huge economic problems of their own, how can anyone possibly make the argument that Europe plus Ukraine can do what Europe plus the United States plus Ukraine could not do? And the answer is they can't. What are they going to do? Launch another offensive like the one they launched on June 4th of 2023? I don't think so. I mean, that's not going to work.
Businesses everywhere are turning to Gusto for payroll, benefits, and more. Save time. Save money. It's no wonder Gusto is named Czech Republic's best payroll software. Get started for free at gusto.com.
What's the secret to peak health? Going micro with Noom. Micro habits, micro wins, even microdose GLP-1s. Micro? I can do one.
That's not going to work. The Ukrainians have no military option here. We could get into this. They're in deep trouble on the battlefield. And everywhere you read about this, it's not just you and I making this argument. All sorts of Ukrainians are making the argument that they're in the deep kimchi. So how are we going to pull this, one off? How's Trump going to pull this one off? How is he going to help Ukraine recapture all that lost territory and maybe even take some Russian territory? And the answer is, he is not.
Hard truth moment. Rhetoric about big counteroffensives often collides with the realities of supply, training, and force ratios. You can't manufacture 10,000 trained infantry overnight or rebuild an industrial base in months. That's why talk about sweeping victories should be measured against what armies can actually sustain in manpower and logistics.
The Russians have no designs on Eastern.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the resveratrol. This helps with youthful gene expression, soaks up free radicals, helps the health of the mitochondria, increases your energy levels, and gets cells to go into apoptosis if they're senesced. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. It stacks well with C60, NAD+, ubiquinol, clarity factor. Let's talk about clarity factor for a second. Clarity factor will get rid of that brain fog. Clarity factor will help you concentrate on your tasks and over time increase the positive neuroplasticity. So your dendritic connections improve. You will think faster. You'll have better memory. Drink it with filtered water. Take it every day. And like I said, stack it with C60, ubiquinol, NAD+, resveratrol. So a powerful stack here. Clarity factor with resveratrol. Please go to my store. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And that free gift you're going to need in the fall and the winter.
Europe, and they have no designs on Western Europe. Furthermore, they do not have an army that is capable of conquering territory in Eastern Europe, much less running to the beaches of Dunkirk. This is threat inflation of the worst sort, and we hear it all the time. But the Russians have never shown any interest in conquering territory beyond Ukraine. And furthermore, as you and I have talked about ad nauseum, and people on our side have talked about ad nauseum, the Russians don't have any designs on conquering Western Ukraine. And in fact, they would be crazy to try to conquer Western Ukraine because it's filled with ethnic Ukrainians who would put up huge resistance over the long term against the Russian occupation. So the idea that we're sort of dealing with Adolf Hitler in May 1940, and he's poised to take France and Belgium, Holland, and then when he's done there, he's going to head east. I mean, this is just not the world that we live in. Russia is nowhere near as powerful as the Soviet Union was. Russia is not a potential hegemon in Europe. And the Russians know full well what happened when they tried to conquer Afghanistan. They know full well what happened when they occupied Eastern Europe during the Cold War. They were up to their eyeballs and alligators dealing with trouble in East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Albania, Romania, Yugoslavia. They're not going back into Eastern Europe. This conflict is all about NATO expansion into Ukraine. And once Ukraine is defeated and becomes a neutral state, if the West is smart, it can go a long way towards improving relations with Russia over the long term.
Smart diplomacy isn't appeasement, it's pragmatic risk reduction. Neutrality arrangements, arms control talks, targeted economic leverage. These are the tools that can buy breathing room. But politics and public opinion often make pragmatic compromise difficult, and that's a real barrier to a sensible, long-term settlement.
I'm actually surprised, as I've said before. I'm actually surprised, as I've said before, that the Ukrainians have continued to fight as ferociously as they have up to this point. There's no question that they have a huge problem recruiting people to go to the front lines. The number of draft dodgers is enormous. And furthermore, they have a significant desertion problem. But nevertheless, the forces that they do have on the front line, who General Syrski himself says are outnumbered 3-1 overall and 6-1. Just think about that, outnumbered 6-1 at certain critical points along the front line. And nevertheless, the Ukrainians continue to fight like wild dogs. In a certain sense, it's truly impressive. It shows you the power of nationalism. They've gone on longer than I thought would be the case. But at some point, I do believe that the front lines will break because you can't sustain this forever. I'd also note, Danny, when they talk about these Ukrainian counterattacks and they talk about the Ukrainians moving all sorts of forces from other areas to the Pokrovsk region and then launching counterattacks. Counterattacks are offensive operations. You're out in the open. And as all the news stories on what the battlefield looks like tell us, when you're out in the open, you're exposed and you're likely to die.
That's the grim arithmetic of modern mechanized warfare. When you go on the offensive without dominance in air, drones, and artillery, casualties spike. Good commanders pick their moments. But when political imperatives push for offensive action, the human cost can rise fast.
General Syrski says that the Ukrainians are outnumbered 3-1. And some people are arguing that the overall number is even bigger than that. That the number 700,000, which is given for the number of Russian forces up inside of Ukraine, the number is actually higher than 700,000. But anyway, Syrski says the Russians have a 3-1 advantage overall, and at critical points they have a 6-1 advantage. You just want to think about that. That's a huge advantage. And then we talked about the Wall Street Journal that talked about how Russian drones are making it almost impossible for Ukraine to move troops up to the front line. And then you start talking about just the overall balance in the drone war. It's quite clear it shifted significantly in favor of the Russians over the Ukrainians. Early in the war, the Ukrainians had the advantage in terms of drones. Now the Russians have a clear advantage. If you look at artillery and other pieces of weaponry, the Russians have a significant advantage. Very important, if you look at glide bombs, right? The Russians have a huge inventory of glide bombs, which they use liberally against fixed positions on the Ukrainian side of the line. And the Ukrainians admit, if you read the newspapers carefully, that these glide bombs are devastating. How many glide bombs do the Ukrainians have? 0. Then when you go to air defenses, we read about all these air attacks involving missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones, deep into Ukraine. It's quite clear that the Ukrainians don't have the capability to shoot these missiles and drones down, and that the Russians are pounding the industrial base inside of Ukraine. Ukraine has been making an effort to develop weapons of its own, to develop its own industrial base so that it can fight the war better. Fully understandable. But the Russians have good intelligence. They know where those industrial locations are, or those industries are. And when they're ready to open up and start producing weapons, the Russians attack.
Which is why wartime industrial resilience matters. If you can't hide or disperse critical production, you become vulnerable. Modern conflicts punish fixed, centralized production. Dispersal, redundancy, and mobility are survival techniques, not luxuries.
I think there's sort of been 4 big
Please go to my store, bud-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Myotrol. This will help with the gene expression to build muscle, do resistance training, use the Myotrol, express the genes to help to build the muscle. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression to build muscle. This is extremely important if you're 40 years of age, male or female, to help reduce atrophy and to build muscle. Vitamin B complex helps to boost up your energy levels. The first 4 B vitamins helps with the electron transport chain to increase your ATP. Vitamin B complex increases your cellular metabolism, and B12 helps to protect your neurons. Omega-3 brings down inflammation, helps with your lipid profile, and reduces the stickiness of red blood cells. This is very important to take for cardiovascular health. So a great stack for cardiovascular health, omega-3. Vitamin B complex to help protect your neurons and rev up your metabolism, and Myotrol to express the genes to build muscle. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last.
Incidents here that people are talking about. One is the drones that went into Poland. 2 is one drone that wandered into Romania and then out. And then there's all this talk about these drones that were near the airports in Oslo and Copenhagen, and Oslo Airport and Copenhagen Airport were shut down as a result. So there's sort of 3 incidents involving drones. And then there's the incident of 3 MiGs that are said to have flown into Estonian airspace. Now, the Russians categorically denied that they flew those MiGs into Estonian airspace. So the Russians have no interest in sending MiGs into NATO territory. And I think the worst case that could be made for the Russian position is that those 3 MiGs went over this small pile of rocks that's about 25 kilometers from the Estonian coastline in the Baltic. The Russians denied that they went over these rocks, which belong to Estonia. But let's assume that they did. It's just not that big a deal. And with regard to the drones, the one drone that went into Romania, is this serious? No. And then the drones in Oslo and Copenhagen, there's no evidence that they're Russian drones. So the only real incident here are, I think, about 19 drones went into Poland. And the Russians did not do this on purpose, according to them. And the Russians have proposed that the West and Russia get together to investigate exactly what happened. That's what the Russians want to do. They want to investigate what happened. They're not denying that those Russian drones wandered into Poland, but they have made it clear that they did not do it on purpose, right? They were not trying to provoke Poland or NATO. And they said, let's examine what happened here. And by the way, these were reconnaissance drones or dummies. They were not, armed drones. But NATO, of course, refused, or the West refused to try and figure out exactly what happened here. I would also note to you that it appears that of the 19 drones that went into Poland, NATO shot down 3 of them. These are drones, reasonably easy to shoot down. They only shot down 3 of the 19. So not a very good performance. But my bottom line here is I do not believe the Russians are trying to pick a fight with NATO.
That restraint, real or calculated, is the single most stabilizing fact in this whole episode. Both sides have reasons to avoid a direct NATO-Russia shooting war. That makes careful calibrated diplomacy and correct attribution all the more important. Mistakes are expensive.
All right, we're going to go to Pete Hegseth calling for a special meeting with the generals. This is going to be on MSNBC. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the drops and the lozenges. Be prepared for the fall and winter. The moment you have that throat irritation, mitigate it right away by taking the drops and the lozenges. The drops, you can get in 100 count per bag. You can get it in honey and lemon, and cherry, and also in blueberry. Get a few bags for your household, have some at work and at home. The moment you have that throat irritation, take them right away. I also have elderberry zinc in stock. You get 21 lozenges in each bag for the elderberry zinc. The lozenges are slightly bigger than the drops. Now, be prepared. The moment you have that throat irritation, take them right away to mitigate the problem, especially for this fall and winter. This winter and fall will be problematic. Pay attention to the news, especially about the wastewater. I'm already starting to see issues in New York with higher incidences. Now, ashwagandha root, take it. It helps to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Helps to bring down inflammation. Lignans helps to bring down inflammation, soaks up free radicals, helps to improve your endocrine system and your immune system. And turmeric soaks up free radicals and brings down inflammation. Now, when you stack these together, you're helping your cardiovascular health, your immune system will be boosted up, and you're reducing inflammation at the cerebral level to help to protect your neurons. So it's dual purpose. This stack is very powerful. Take it every day to help to slow down the aging process. But it also is very important to take during the fall and the winter to keep down that inflammation. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Be prepared, stock up for the fall and the winter. And if you take my advice and do this on a regular basis, you're going to slow down the aging process.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered hundreds of top military leaders to gather at a Marine Corps base in Virginia next week. It's not clear why the meeting has been called. More than a dozen people familiar with the matter telling the Washington Post the directive is sent to nearly every top U.S. military commander around the world. That includes officials in conflict zones stationed throughout Europe, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific region. According to the Post, every source it spoke with said it could not recall a defense secretary ever ordering such a large gathering of military leaders on such short notice. Joining us now, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hartling and President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haas. Good morning to you both. General, I'll start with you. First of all, how unusual is this in your experience, and what do you suspect is going on here?
Yeah, Willie, if this is usual and this is unusual, we're way out in terms of unusual in this one. It is never
that I know of ever occurred in the history of the military where everyone is brought in. Now, certainly during wartime, generals commanding in a theater are brought in individually with their team, or the president or the secretary of defense visits them at their...
You know what I think it is? I think there is serious talk of a two-front war happening under Trump's administration, dealing with Ukraine and NATO getting more involved and going after targets to take back land and potentially even hit targets in Russia, and to get ready for the potentiality of Taiwan being hit by China.
Fear of operation, but I've never seen anything like this before, and it just seems extremely bizarre and strange.
Well, General, let me just ask you strategically, how stupidly dangerous is this?
It's pretty dangerous, Joe. What I'd say is, a lot of people are looking at it from the general's perspective, them thinking, what the heck are we going to hear? Because I don't think from what I've talked to some of my colleagues that are still active, they don't know what this is about. So it could be about a shifting national security strategy. It could be cuts to the general officer corps. The Secretary Hegseth has mentioned that several times. It could be about the upcoming budget stalemate, or it could be concerns over information leaks or press leaks.
But General, don't they have communication systems where they can do that so we can actually keep our generals and our admirals in the field where they are needed?
Certainly, Joe, and they're called secure video teleconferences. It is the same thing as a secure computer, not Snapchat, not Signals app. This is no kidding secure stuff. It's just like a supercomputer. But the problem is, when you move that many general officers to Washington, it's not just the generals that are concerned. I would suggest that both our allies and our foes are thinking to themselves, what the hell is going on in Washington? When a general comes into the Pentagon to talk to his boss, the Secretary of Defense, no one really knows. There may be indicators. But when you're talking about publicizing over 800 senior leaders, commanders, as well as their senior enlisted advisors, their sergeant majors or their Navy chief petty officers, this is something that's going to garner attention, where people are going to say, what's going on with the U.S. military? What are they planning? Why is this so important that you're pulling 800, as suggested by the Washington Post, or more into the Washington, D.C. area? It's undescribable.
Yeah, and it's not just foreign militaries that are confused. Our own military is confused. Talking to some of these generals who have no idea why this is happening. I'm not sure why there's such secrecy, but we should note this. The military has different levels of classification. This one, we are told, is being deemed a secret level, which is not the highest level, because there have been some speculation considering our force posture outside Venezuela and the attacks on boats there. Could this be some sort of operational planning meeting? That seems unlikely, because it would be classified at a higher level, Richard Haas. So there's some speculation in Washington, people I talked to yesterday who were downright puzzled with this, that this could be just sort of almost like a pep talk. We know that Defense Secretary Hegseth, is one of the things President Trump likes about him most is he's very good on Fox News and the like. The language about war fighters, a lot of his PR campaign. And there's a suggestion here, taken in tandem with the edict from the Pentagon last week about reporters there only reporting on things that Pentagon tells them to. This might be just a messaging meeting, but a very, very strange one.
I think that's the most likely answer. If it were operational, you wouldn't have people globally. It would be more localized. My own sense, it's almost a cultural thing. Hegseth wants to change the culture of the military against DEI in favor of quote-unquote war fighting and so forth. He also wants to assert his authority, because there's been a lot of pushback. So my sense is it's more like that. But it doesn't change any of the ideas that this is expensive. It's potentially risky because people aren't at their jobs. It's just a stunt, and it looks truly excessive.
Let me get this straight.
Ways to do.
Let me get this straight. You got a lot of people on the Democrat side that's for climate. They're talking about climate change and people need to reduce their carbon footprint, but they'll go to these climate conferences and World Economic Forum conferences and Davos and blah, blah, blah. And they're flying thousands of people back and forth around the world. So when you add in Davos, the World Economic Forum, and these other climate conferences, climate change conferences, the carbon footprint for that is far more and more expensive than anything the United States is doing with its generals. If it was more expensive to fly around the generals, we have way too many fucking generals and we should get rid of them.
Wars in recent years, by the way, without people leaving their bases. That's why we have these secure video systems. When I was at the White House, we went through the entire Gulf War, and most of it was run that way. You don't need to do something like this, so this has to be something much more personal.
Yeah, even some Republicans rolling their eyes at this yesterday, saying that Hegseth, again, he and his senior leadership team very depleted, perhaps out of their depth. Richard?
Okay. I think we're getting ready for war in potentially with the use of NATO. All right, let's go to Steve Ratner.
Well, right now, the White House is telling federal agencies to prepare for another possible round of mass firings unless Congress can pass a measure by the end of Tuesday, which is when government funding is set to expire. As we said, one point of contention dividing the two parties is funding for health care. For more on that, let's bring in former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst, Steve Ratner. And Steve, your first chart takes us through projections on how many Americans could lose their health insurance from the proposed budget cuts. What did you find?
Yeah, look, as you said, Nika, healthcare has become the major issue in this shutdown. And for good reason, as I'm going to show you. You haven't heard Republicans say lately, let's repeal Obamacare. Have you? I don't think I haven't heard. You probably haven't heard, because it's not popular to say that. So they've been doing it surreptitiously, piece by piece. They are dismantling Obamacare. And that is what the Democrats are fighting for in this go-round. So
maybe we should dismantle Obamacare. I'm actually listening to the audiobook of the memoirs for Obama. And actually, it's pretty good. It's kind of funny in a way. But I have to do it at 1.5 speed because I don't want to spend 30 hours of my life listening to Obama. So I recommend you paying attention to the memoirs of all the presidents, no matter if you're Republican or Democrat, just to get a good slice of history and to understand the perspective. But he's talking in a chapter about Obamacare and how important it is and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, the reality of the situation is the country can't afford these social programs. And we're going to have to start truncating social programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all these things. We can't afford it. We cannot afford it until we start paying down our debt. Now, if we had lower debt, then maybe we can have these social programs, but we can't. We can't afford it. We don't want to go down the doom loop that Britain and France is in. Now, people would say, well, that means that people aren't going to have their health care. So what? You should have paid attention to taking care of your body when you could have. And this is the whole point I'm making. We can save tens of billions, if not $100 billion a year by just people looking in the mirror and saying they can improve their life by approaching a change in their lifestyle and reduce the healthcare costs that way. Diabetes, heart disease, and cancer primarily are due to lifestyle. Now, yes, there are some cases where it is related to genetic issues or epigenetic issues where you were born with it, or you were exposed to something that was not in your control, and then all of a sudden something happens. Yes, but the far majority of the people that have problems in the United States, it's self-induced. Self-induced. So $100 billion are going to healthcare because of people being egoistic, self-centered, want to pick a lifestyle that is destructive for their body. Why should the taxpayers have to pick up the pieces for people that aren't paying attention to their own health? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the complete multivitamin. The multivitamin, this multivitamin is easy to digest, and it has the multivitamins for cofactors for proper enzymatic activity so your cells perform properly. So if your cells are performing properly, your organ systems and tissues are performing properly. And also stack it with the probiotic. You can get it in the veggie cap version or in the powder. I prefer the powder, but both are very high quality. And with a good probiotic, you're going to improve your gut biome, you're going to improve your nutrient absorption, improve your metabolism, improve the thickness of the mucosal layer, improve the concentrations of your antibodies within your gut biome, and you improve the communication between your gut and your liver and your gut and your brain. You'll sleep better, you'll be detoxifying your central nervous system, you'll be getting rid of that brain fog, you'll be able to concentrate better, and your memory improves. Your skin will improve too. So health at the gut is super important for overall systemic health. And you do that by eating properly, drinking filtered water, staying away from processed foods, and taking a good probiotic. Make sure you eat vegetables and fruits too. Really important on a daily basis. But through proper diet and exercise, proper supplementation, sleeping, getting proper sleep, learning new things, talking, reading, writing, when you do all these different modalities to improve your health, they work synergistically so you slow down the aging process. And that's how you reduce the cost of healthcare. Not asking for more money by the government that only is going to issue more bonds into the market, cause inflation, and increase the debt. So which one is the more important way to solve the problem? Telling people that their lifestyle is the reason why we have such high healthcare costs. To get off their ass, start moving around, and start improving their health. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the digestive probiotic, right? This is the MB40 probiotic or the powdered version, and get the complete multivitamin. That's the foundation for the health protocol to slow down the aging process. And you'll get lots of benefits from it. But if you still think that you just need the government to pay more money so you get healthy, guess what? You're not going to get healthy, and you're going to have less money and more debt. And Obamacare.
Obamacare started right about in here, and with about 45 million Americans uninsured, down here to 25 million. In other words, 20 million Americans got insurance, largely, if not entirely, because of Obamacare. And now a combination of changes is going to bring that back up here, and it's going to take away 70% of the people who got health insurance under Obamacare are going to lose it, both because of what's in the big, beautiful bill and because of what's on the table right now, which I'm going to explain. And you can see it breaks down to a few pieces. These are the changes made in the big, beautiful bill. That's 10 million of this 14. And now what's on the table for this shutdown would be 4.2 million more people losing their health insurance if the Republicans get their way. I'm not going to go through this whole chart, but the point of it is to basically say they did it a whole bunch of different ways, very nerdy, very in the weeds, things people couldn't really get angry about because they don't really, frankly, understand most of them. You know, something like a work requirement, which is the biggest of it. You may say, sure, people who should work to get Medicaid, but the fact is many people who qualify for the exemption from work don't know how to fill out the forms, don't know how to do it. And so a quarter of those 14 million people would be people who lose it because they don't know how to take advantage of their exemption from the work requirement.
So Steve, as we move to your second chart, there are these tax credits, enhanced tax credits that boost coverage that are set to expire at the end of the year. What impact will that have?
Yeah, so that's what's on the table. The Democrats have a long wish list, but when you talk to them privately, what it comes down to for the moment, they're not going to get the big, beautiful bill unwound. But it comes down for the moment is another provision set to expire at the end of this year, unrelated to the big, beautiful bill. A bunch of extra tax credits that were passed during the Biden administration under the American Rescue Plan to both provide more aid and to deal with an original kind of little design flaw in Obamacare. So this is the percent of income that people have to pay for health care. This is the income level starting at the bottom, obviously, and going all the way up here. And under the ACA, there was this cliff where if you got about $60,000 a year of income, for a single person, the amount you paid suddenly went up like that and then eventually declined. The provision that was put in during the Biden administration provided what are called enhanced subsidies and took your costs down to here. And so if this expires at the end of the year, as it is currently scheduled to do, for all these folks, the percent of their income that they're going to pay is going to go back to this pink line. And that's what's really at stake at the moment. And you can see that those enhanced tax credits were very, very popular. The number of people taking it went from 10 million all the way up here to 20 million as they came into effect. Most of the people who get it are people down here, which is 250% of the poverty line is about $40,000 a year. So these are people for whom buying insurance would be very, very costly. And so we were providing a wonderful benefit to them that is going to go away in the course of this year if there's not some agreement.
So they're going to have fewer people.
Where's this chart? Where's this chart that actually shows and how much it is annually? Oh, they don't want to tell you that.
Insurance rolls. And Steve, what
What's
is
the
that
cost?
Premiums ultimately?
No, not the premiums. Don't sweep it under the rug, Mika. What's the cost to the taxpayer? Not the health. Not the cost of the premium or the deductible of the one that's being insured. What's the cost to the overall taxpayer for this package in the aggregate? How many billions of dollars are we paying that we can't afford? Where's the chart?
Then premiums tripling?
Yeah, so fewer people on health insurance means that health insurance companies raise prices for everyone who's buying through these marketplaces that were created under the ACA or Obamacare, because fewer people, it just makes it more expensive for them. And so you had 312 insurers already file for their rates for next year. And they're assuming that these things expire. That's what they have to. That's the current law. And when you look at these are all the different ones, but the point of it is 18% proposed rate change, not just for the people that I was talking about before, but for everybody who buys their insurance through the Obamacare marketplace. And then if you want to take a look at what this means for a representative family, take a 55-year-old couple making $85,000 a year. Their insurance bill at the moment is $7,225, thanks to the subsidies that we talked about. The subsidies go away. The bill goes to $20,792. But then you have what I talked about a minute ago, that premiums just go up in general because fewer people are on insurance. So the premiums actually go to $24,535. You tell me how a couple making $85,000.
Okay, so we can back this out a little bit and play and do a rough, really rough estimate. This is probably understating it. But if you take the subsidy, this is about approximately $14,000, and you times it by the 4.5 billion that he was talking about, all right, this is costing the American taxpayer annually $63 billion. And that's lowballing it. $63 billion. Now you understand what I've been saying? If people look in the mirror and say most of the causes that they have, most of the medical problems that they have that are chronic are self-induced and that they can fix it, we could be saving $100 billion a year in healthcare costs. No, we gotta have Obamacare. We gotta have Obamacare.
Can afford to pay $24,000 for their insurance. Hence, you see all those people dropping off of the insurance rolls.
Mike?
I have a question for you, Joe, as a former member of Congress. How do you, in good conscience, cast a vote knowingly to eliminate or reduce people's health insurance?
Reduce the.
I'm going to give you a great example. When we first got up there,
Reduce the
we had
debt.
95 contract with America, and it was term limits, it was balanced budget, it was making Congress apply, it was tax cuts, it was regulatory cuts. And I voted for most of them, but one of them was cuts in Medicaid. And this was at the height of and I go, wait a minute, and the argument was that this is welfare this is healthcare welfare. And I just remember saying
it goes back to what I've been saying. You have to tax the uber wealthy, the multi-billionaires, by 75% of their wealth. That way you're reducing their power on K Street. And you have to titrate the reduced benefits of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid based on 5-year increments. So if you're if you're within a 5 years from retirement, you get all of your benefits until you die. If you're 10 years away, then you get less benefits, but you get some. And if you're 15 years away, then you get even less. 20 years away, even less. 25 years away, even less. Up to the point where there's going to be a generation that gets nothing. And so they have plenty of time to save. They have plenty of time to be healthy. They have plenty of time to take responsibility. That's how you do it. These two don't give a shit. You know why? Because they're making lots of money and they got a Cadillac plan.
We would go on to be the class that balanced the budget 4 years in a row. The only time it's happened in the century. And I said to my freshman brothers and sisters, I said, listen, if you're going to make the argument that we have deficits because the poor people are getting away with too much, like you live in another country than I do, and I swear to say to them, go to the hospital.
It's not about the deficit. The deficit is approximately $2 trillion. It's about the debt of 37 trillion, dumbass.
In your hometown at 11 o'clock at night and look at the single mom with 3 kids that are using the emergency room as their primary care facility, and then vote to cut against Medicaid. I couldn't do that in 95. I don't know how anybody.
Why don't you tell them to actually go to the pediatrician instead of going to the emergency room? And most people don't take their kids to the emergency room. They take it to actually a 24-hour clinic. They don't take it to an ER. They take it to a 24-hour clinic. So come on, Joe. Wake up. Morning, Joe. Wake up.
Did this in 2025. I really don't. I especially like these Republicans in swing states and states that Biden won, and they're trying to justify it because, listen, they thought they were smart that by pushing past the election, the cuts, the midterms, the cuts. No. Hospitals in their home districts have to start planning now. So what do? They shut down neonatal units. They shut down nursing homes.
He's bringing up a good point, but he's not saying it very well. Most hospitals, especially community hospitals, are underwater. So if you start taking away the health benefits of a society in mass, you stop the subsidies to the hospitals, they're gonna go under. So what is this really about? Let's say mass amounts of people take my advice and get healthy. And they don't have to, if you're healthy, you don't need to see a fucking doctor. Get real. All right? But they take that advice and they get healthy. And you're squeezing out $100 billion of costs a year. You'll have a lot of community hospitals going belly up. So what is this really about? What is this really about? Is it really about giving people health care and the outcomes suck? You think this $100 billion that we're spending is actually giving people better outcomes? They're not. Get real. So $100 billion and the outcomes suck. And we're propping up hospitals that should go under.
All of these services, there has been, we've been talking about on the show for some time, an emergency in rural health care, a crisis for the past decade. This has expedited it in a way that again, I guess Republicans from rural America just didn't know how much their vote was going to savage health care. But this is one of those things where, do you really fear Donald Trump so much?
Oh, so it's the farmers. The farmers, they should have known better, and then all of a sudden they're at fault. And Trump, they should have known that Trump was a bad guy. Americans are sick because of what they eat, what they breathe, what they drink, and their lifestyle. The far majority of Americans that are sick is because it's self-induced. So to reverse that and to have better outcomes than using pharmacopoeia is to actually start having a better lifestyle. And we save all this money. Now, if you compare rural America, where they're actually working on a farm, not just rural America and they're poor and they don't do anything, but rural America working on a farm, they're healthier than you look at someone that's in the inner city. Now, why is that? Is it because they're moving around? Is it because they're closer to the land?
Of farmers and small business owners in your own district. In this case, they did.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, on that happy that morning, Joe, economic analyst and YouTube star in a massive way. And I think we all are shocked. I still haven't figured it out. Lemire's doing something for the Atlantic on this. For some reason, he's really big in South Korea and Azerbaijan.
Okay.
Cross demographics.
Yes.
Yeah, all demographics.
Okay.
Steve Radner, thank you as always.
And then
Come over and
walks
give us a
out.
hug.
Yeah, no, he won't do that.
He's a big YouTube star. He's a big YouTube star. Must have saved tens of thousands of people during COVID. Big YouTube star. Yeah. He must have informed the whole public that there was a bioweapon that was released. Yeah. He's a big YouTube star. Saved lots of people. And he can't create a chart that tells you how much the taxpayers have to subsidize Obamacare. I have to do a back of an envelope calculation. Yeah, tough guy. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, so you could be a tough guy. Get the Gladiator Barley. Do resistance training. This is a high-density protein, and it'll help you to build muscle. This works really well with a stack with Myotrol or with Boomer Boost. Build that muscle. But it also helps to detoxify your body. And when you detoxify your body, you're helping your endocrine system, your immune system, your brain function. It also brings down inflammation. That's helping with your cardiovascular system, your endocrine system, and your immune system, and your brain function. It soaks up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. You take this on a regular basis, and you're actually slowing down the aging process. And you're building muscle if you're doing resistance training. Taking Gladiator Barley is far better than Obamacare. Trust me. And heirloom barley, it's very similar to Gladiator Barley, but it's more focused on detoxifying your body, bringing down inflammation, and soaking up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. And it's not focused on the strength training. Please go to my store, get either the heirloom barley or the Gladiator Barley, and you won't need Obamacare. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper. All right, what else is going on here?
FBI Director James Comey expected to surrender today to authorities after being indicted yesterday on 2 charges. The charges include false statements within jurisdiction of the legislative branch and obstruction of a congressional proceeding. Both alleged crimes relate to Comey's testimony during a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing back in 2020 on the investigation into ties between Russia and President Trump's 2016 campaign. Comey responded to the indictment in an Instagram video last night. Watch.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way.
No.
We will not live on our knees.
No. He was part of a deep state operation to circumvent the will of the people. That's what he did. And Trump's DOJ needs to use the full extent of the law to hunt them down, prosecute them and hold them accountable. Because they were the deep state to try to prevent you from having a Donald Trump presidency. They wanted to circumvent your vote. That's what this guy did.
And you shouldn't either. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice.
Yeah, right.
But I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial.
Okay.
And keep the faith.
Oh, okay. All right, tough guy.
Comey is set to be arraigned on
guy.
October 9th in Alexandria, Virginia. President Trump responded to the indictment on Truth Social this morning, writing, James Dirty Cop Comey was a destroyer of lives. He knew exactly what he was saying, and that it was a very serious and far-reaching lie, for which a very big price must be paid. Joining me now is Texas Congressman Dan Crenshaw. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. We are scrubbing these charges, and we want to
This
get
guy,
your analysis
of course,
on it.
I'm sure that he's going to say something in this regard I'll probably agree with, but I don't trust this guy. I don't trust him. He's one-eyed McCain. That's what he is. He's a rhino, but he's probably going to be going in line with what I believe in terms of Comey. But the thing is that Crenshaw is someone that you can't really trust. I don't trust him at all. I think he's a fucking asshole.
Tell you that the judge assigned to Comey's case is a 2021 Biden appointee, Judge Michael Nachmanoff. How does that fit into your thinking here? And give us your reaction to all of this.
Well, I think people like Director Patel and Bondi, they're making good on their promises. I think on what the American people wanted, which was holding on to these people accountable for a lot of the transgressions that occurred with respect to crossfire.
Well, he's a congressman. He's been there for a while. He could have made a larger voice out there to hold these people accountable, all of them. He didn't. Oh, so now he's going to ride the coattails of the DOJ as Bondi and Kash Patel are hunting them down? Well, what about before Trump got it back into the presidency? Why not under Biden's administration? Didn't you do anything? He didn't do a fucking thing. And this is the reason why. He's a bullshit guy.
This is one indictment on a very specific charge lying to Congress about I'm still combing through exactly what that indictment is as well. So lying to Congress about I think authorizing an FBI agent to become an anonymous.
Maybe you should have done your job during the Biden administration as a congressman from Texas, as a Republican, and actually held these people accountable. Oh, you were afraid. Navy SEAL lost his eye. He was afraid.
Of course, to the Clinton campaign. I don't really understand more details than that, as this is kind of new and breaking news.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, this is about accountability, and I think that's what a lot of people have been asking for. Okay, so clearly something went wrong. We've had multiple reports.
Yeah. Well, Navy SEAL, why weren't you asking questions 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago? Hey, you're a congressman. I thought you were a Navy SEAL. I thought you could do anything.
But even the Mueller reports, especially the Durham report, really show that there was malfeasance that occurred. There was mistakes that occurred, deliberate mistakes that occurred in obtaining FISA warrants on American citizens, going after the Trump campaign. And then people feel like there was no accountability. I mean, a lot of those who did it were fired. But people ask, why is there no criminal accountability? Now, at the time, the laws did not allow for that. We have since changed those laws.
Let me get this straight. You gotta pay attention to the video really closely here. Okay? One-Eyed McCain, Navy SEAL, has been in Congress for a while, didn't do anything during the Biden administration to hold them accountable, the deep state accountable, because he's a rhino, and then he's doing a soft promotion of his fucking book in the corner. Navy SEAL can do anything, even sell books, and don't ask questions.
Again, so that could never happen again.
Yeah.
But this is a different story. This is about lying to Congress under oath, and Comey needs accountability for that. He doesn't get to walk through the woods and write poetry and do other weird things and post on Instagram anymore. He's gonna have to face it. And then this isn't going after Joe. One last thing. This is like, I'm standing up to Trump, so these are the consequences.
Yeah.
No, a grand jury, U.S. citizens indicted you. So.
Well, I remember that at one point Comey did say that he sent confidential information to a professor friend, and he was hoping that professor friend would leak to the media because he wanted to get it out into the media because he wanted a special counsel named, right? And so he admitted that already. And I'm wondering, the idea of false statements and the idea of obstruction. Now, that whole investigation, was there obstruction, or is this a gateway to further charges? That's what Nicole Parker told us at the top of the show. She's a former FBI agent. She said, well, this I see as a gateway into other charges. So when you consider what took place in the whole made-up Russia collusion story, do you see this as a gateway to perhaps even further criminality? Or is this simply about they're charging he lied in that hearing, said, no, I've never been involved in leaking to the media. His colleague, Andrew McCabe, said, I leaked it to the media and it was, directed by Comey, although Andrew McCarthy just said, no, he didn't say that Comey directed him. So we want to know exactly what Comey said and whether or not he was involved in that leak to the media.
Yeah, JIRA is now for all teams, even those cross-functional super teams that keep project managers up at night. With everyone cruising on the same page.
Yeah, and then to come out in the trial, I suppose, as far as to speculate where this goes, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't. I mean, I don't have access to this investigation.
Okay.
That's a question for somebody from the FBI. Currently at the FBI, it's very hard to say. I think this indictment is representative of what we can get him on right now.
Yeah.
The clear evidence of lying to Congress under oath. I don't know where it goes from here, to be honest.
Well, we want to talk with lawyers to fact check all of this, to understand what the stakes are. But let me get your take on the business at hand in terms of your business, and that is you've got one legislative day left to avoid a government shutdown. Your colleagues on the left are downplaying the warning from the White House that if we have a government shutdown, we're going to see large-scale layoffs. What do you think happens on Tuesday, September 30th, when the government runs out of money at midnight? It feels like at this point, we're going to have a shutdown, and the question is more about the length of that shutdown. November 1st, you've got the Affordable Care Act open enrollment possible. Is that a possible off ramp in terms of opening up again? What do you think happens?
Well, the Democrats are making some highly outlandish demands. I mean, I think like a $1.5 trillion demand for a clean, 5-week CR, which is just nuts. It's pretty clear that they have no desire to govern and that they want the government to shut down. If they think the American people are somehow going to blame Trump and Republicans for this shutdown, like the House has already passed a clean CR. And we passed these clean short-term CRs so that we can keep negotiating in good faith without shutting down the government, firing employees, furloughing employees, creating that kind of havoc that happens when you shut down the government. For the Democrats to demand that CA tax credits to come back that were specifically designed for COVID, that's tens of billions of dollars a month. They want a bunch of other things. Again, it's about $1.5 trillion we're talking about. It's a very outlandish demands. I don't know where they think they're going to get the political capital to do this or how they think they're going to spin this. It's absolutely crazy. So I don't know. What I hope happens is Schumer is beating his chest, right? Because they've got to raise money from their base, and their base wants to always go against Republicans and Donald Trump. But I'm hoping that there's a few sensible, right? But I'm hoping there's a few sensible Senate Democrats that cross over and say, look, for the sake of the country, you have to have at least a short-term CR so that we can keep talking like normal people.
You would expect so. Congressman, it's good to see you. We'll be following it all. Thank you, sir. Dan Crenshaw joining us on all of that.
Hey, Congressman, you're a Navy SEAL, all right? You should know how to button up your shirt. You don't need it. You don't need it to go down your belly button. All right? Make sure your shirt's buttoned, soldier. Get your job done. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin D3. This helps with gene expression because D3 is a gene expression cofactor. It helps to absorb calcium, and it helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. Super important to take. And if you take higher doses of this, you can actually help to remodel the bone and mitigate osteoarthritis. Amazing what vitamin D3 does. And vitamin D3 reduces severity of what's coming in the fall and the winter. Vitamin K2 also reduces severity of what's coming in the fall and the winter. And K2, MK7 molecule stacks with D3 to help with cardiovascular health. And if you do resistance training, guess what? You're building bone density. Amazing how that works. Take vitamin D3 and K2 together, especially in the fall and the winter. Reduce the severity. Pay attention or don't pay attention. I don't really care. Nattokinase. This is fibrinolytic. It's going to break up clots. And guess what? There's going to be a lot of people getting clots in the fall and the winter because clots aren't just because of the inoculation. Clots actually form because of the pathogen. Now, nattokinase also will help with the lipid profile. So this is great for your cardiovascular health. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the nattokinase and improve your cardiovascular health. And guess what? If you stack them all together, you get a lot of benefits, especially cardiovascular benefits. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get that stack. Use it for the fall and the winter. Don't be a Crenshaw. Get your job done.
Reporting that she and leading Democrats are calling for an investigation now, what they call a politically motivated leak of her unredacted military service records. This is a pretty big deal. The National Personnel Records Center improperly gave an ally of the Republican in this race, Jack Ciattarelli, unredacted personal information about Mikey Sherrill, including Social Security numbers, the whole bit. It's being called an egregious blunder, a technician's mistake, and we have big questions about what's going to happen next, which is why we assemble our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzana are with us. Rick is, of course, a Republican strategist and partner At Stoneport Capital, Jeannie is Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Just to start off here, Rick, as somebody who's run a lot of campaigns, and I'm just going to assume you've never dealt with any Oppo research, how unusual is this, and what should Mikey Sherrill do about it?
It's amazing how Harvard hires Jeannie even though she's a never Trumper. Wouldn't it be nice to actually have a mix of people over at the Kennedy Center? Some people that are actually Republican, some people that are Democrat, you know, a nice even split, people that, you know, see the benefits of the Trump administration and others that don't, so the students can see both sides. No, you gotta hire a bunch of liberals.
Military service record, and certainly better redactions than having the Social Security on every page that they turned over to the Ciarelli campaign, basically. So this is a huge embarrassment for the agency that is charged with managing our National Archives, and it's happened before. Don Bacon had his service record released to his opponent. I mean, like, they need to get their act together. Regardless of the requests that come in, we have to depend on these institutions to do their part of the job, and in this case, pretty clear failure.
Well, the House Oversight Ranking Member Robert Garcia, who may not have the power to make this happen, is demanding an investigation of what he calls illegal, likely politically motivated disclosure. This comes down to something that happened at the Naval Academy in 1994. Mikey Sherrill and a number of her classmates were not allowed to walk in the ceremony because of a big scandal. It was a cheating scandal going on here that involved a number of students. This is, again, took place in 1992. The scandal itself, she would have walked in 94. 24 classmates were expelled. Jeannie Sherrill says that she didn't walk classmates, that she, in fact, did not cheat on this test. What is the political implication of this disclosure?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know why you're assuming that Rick Davis hasn't done Oppo research, Joe. We both know he has.
I'm just, you know, okay.
I know. I think number one, the timing of this could not be worse for her campaign. I mean, the latest Emerson, I think it was the Emerson poll, had them neck and neck. And of course, we all know that New Jersey has been moving a bit over to the more, I don't know, you want to call it reddish, purplish side. So this is going to be a big loss for the Democrats if she doesn't retain this seat. And I think, certainly you hear the Democrats, you mentioned Garcia, Hakeem Jeffries, they want to get to the bottom of this. They want an investigation. They may get one. But the question is, was this something that was done by mistake, as they are saying, a technician, or was it truly done in order to undermine her and the campaign? Regardless, the information released is very personal, including Social Security numbers, phone numbers. I mean, the list goes on and on. So incredibly damaging and arguably a violation of the Privacy Act. So whoever did it may indeed be held accountable if they conduct this investigation.
Yeah. You mentioned the Emerson College poll, Jeannie. They did this with The Hill and Pix 11, 43 to 43. Mikey Sherrill, Jack Ciarelli, 11% still undecided. Rick, what's going on in New Jersey? You buy these numbers?
Yeah, I think it's a relatively close race. Ciarelli's a well-known candidate from before member of the legislature. And so I'm not surprised that it's close. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, we were electing, Chris Christie to 2 terms as governor of New Jersey. Republicans can compete statewide. It's not a blue state. But the bottom line on it is this will upset the apple cart, right? There'll be a discussion around this. And what is interesting is how Mikey Sherrill will handle it, because obviously it brings to attention not just this cheating scandal, but her service in the military, helicopter pilot, Patriot. It's quite a contrast with Ciarelli. And so I think one of these things you have to always look at, like, whoa, can this boomerang on us, right? I mean, like, an attack on her time in the Naval Academy reminds everybody that, she put public service first when she was, 18 years old. And and served admirably in the military. So at the end of the day, I'm not putting much credibility into the outcome based on this controversy, because of course the other thing is it looks like political manipulation, and Trump leaned in on it even in his comments. So at the end of the day, it's going to be a close race, and we're going to see whether or not the Democratic machine in New Jersey is able to get out the vote. I mean, it is interesting that, basically the youth votes going Democratic and the senior votes going Republican, and battles in between.
Well, Rick makes a good point here, Jeannie. It reminds us that Mikey Sherrill has used her military service as a centerpiece of her candidacy here. And that's why this is a story to begin with. She did, we should note, go on to serve in the Navy for 9 years, as Rick mentioned, helicopter pilot. The Academy, the Naval Academy website lists her as a notable graduate. She received the Navy Achievement Medal for saving the life of a fellow shipmate while at the Academy, and the prestigious Distinguished Public Service Award in 2024. That's the Navy's highest civilian honor. So if you're advising her campaign today, Jeannie, do you tell her to get to the Academy right now, go to Annapolis, and film a new ad on campus?
Yeah, you might. And I have to say, I think she has done a good job already, because you read the quote. I mean, what she is telling voters is the only reason that I was kept out of the ceremony was because I refused to turn in my fellow classmates. In other words, I am not somebody who is going to go and, tell who was involved. I will keep that to myself. And for many people, particularly in New Jersey, that is a very respectable reason to, to do that.
Think about what she just said. Just think about what she just said. It's okay to hide people from doing something that is against the rules or against the law. This is a Democrat, a never-Trumper, that is a fellow at Harvard University, at the Kennedy School. Right there. This is a classic example of why the Democrats have fucked up America. Well, I'm not gonna tattletale on my, fellow students, even though they broke the law, broke ethical conduct. What? Classic. Right there's classic.
Prove that by saying, to your point, I served 10 years, highest level of distinction and honor. So she's trying, and her campaign is trying to use this to her advantage. And she is no snitch, Joe Matthew, and that's what she wants people to know.
You said it. So is that the bumper sticker? Is that the bumper sticker?
I'm no snitch. I'm no snitch, so just hire me. I'll hide. It's amazing how these politicians think. It's amazing. So the Democrats, let me get this straight. The Democrats aren't going to reveal their impropriety because they don't want to snitch on each other. So that means that they have high ethics. Huh? No, what's ethical is doing what's right. And if you are following the rules, but other people that aren't, let's say stealing from the treasury, the taxpayers, or doing, some sort of impropriety, of course it's your responsibility to talk to the authorities and make sure that conduct is investigated. You don't hide it. You don't hide. But that's the Democratic Party. It's okay. You want to steal from USAID? Oh, it's okay. We won't tell anybody. Brought to you by the Democratic Party. See what I mean by Jeannie not being too bright? But she's working at Harvard University's Kennedy Center as a fellow. Because she doesn't snitch.
I'm no snitch.
Okay, let's just be totally clear with our listening and viewing audience. It is a violation of the Academy Ethics Code.
Yes.
All right.
Do not bring this in. So regardless of the situational ethics of my co-panelists. I don't think that's a particularly good campaign.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. If you are at a prestigious university like the Naval Academy or West Point, it's harder to get in. It's harder to get into West Point or the Naval Academy than it is to Harvard. And there is an assumption that your ethics are like super high. And if you're not following the rules, then you should be held accountable. And that means that if you know that a fellow cadet is breaking the rule, you need to tell the authorities, tell the administration, tell the school. And if you hold back, don't be surprised. That's not a bad badge of courage. That's not courage. That's allowing your fellow classmates to break protocol. Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. C60 will soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than a molecule of vitamin C. 1 molecule of C60 is 1,000 times stronger. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning for best absorption. And you can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, or MCT coconut oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Soak up those free radicals, slow down the aging process. It boosts up your immune system, helps with your endocrine system, soaks up free radicals at the vascular level, so you're reducing plaque formation, helps your neurons. You'll have more ATP, healthier mitochondria, less stress on the neuron. Over time, you're going to have better neuroplasticity. You're going to improve your basal layer for your skin, so you're going to have a visual, noticeable difference over a year period of time that you look younger. You get lots of benefits from taking C60, and stacks great with many different of the supplements that I have, like resveratrol, NAD+, and ubiquinol, clarity factor, max 35, boomer boost, the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans. This stacks well with a lot of stuff that I have. So please go to my store, stack it, slow down the aging process, improve your immune system, your endocrine system, and your brain function. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you take a teaspoon a day, every day. I've been doing this since 2016. So that's the end of my show. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos.